in public session. Okay, so the committee will receive oral evidence from the Belfast Harbour Commissioners on funding implications on review of trust boards. We're going to receive oral evidence from the Department for Infrastructure on public sector transformation funding. We're going to consider written evidence from the Clean Water Sports Alliance Northern Ireland and consider 4 statutory rules not subject to assembly procedure. So we're obviously meeting today in the very opulent surroundings of the Belfast Harbour Commissioner office, and we thank them very much for allowing us to have our committee session here today. I think we're all in agreement. It's a lovely surrounding, and we're looking forward to getting into some of the business today. So I'm just informing those who are in attendance in the public gallery that you can use your mobile device through a Wi-Fi connection, but all devices should be muted, and there are to be no recordings or photographs to be taken of our committee meetings. So, members, you can tap that we proceed through the agenda. Yeah.
Great.
So apologies, we just have 2 apologies from Mark Durkin and Nicola Brogan, and Stephen Dunn will be joining us later on in the proceedings. So declarations of interest, remind members that you are obliged to declare any relevant or financial other interests which might reasonably be thought by others to influence your approach to the matter under consideration. Any members who have interest to declare in relation to today's business should do so now, or when the particular matter arises during the meeting. So does any member have any interest to declare today? No? Okay. So item 3 is chairperson's business. So I just want to give you a wee update. Last week, myself and the clerk, we had an informal dinner meeting with the utility regulator. That was on the 21st of May. It'll come as no surprise that the main topic of conversation was to do with water infrastructure and wastewater infrastructure and the funding around that. I updated the utility regulator and those present about what the committee has done in terms of the evidence that we have taken as a committee, and obviously reiterated the committee's position in relation to the funding and what we are hoping to do in the future regarding that. So we just want to place on record thanks to the utility regulator for their hospitality last week and for inviting the committee to have that opportunity, and it was a very useful engagement. Draft minutes, so at page 5, draft minutes of the proceeding of the meeting on the 21st of May 2025. So I'm just seeking agreement that members are content that the minutes are true and accurate reflection of the meeting on the 21st of May. If so, I'll now sign the minutes. Content?
Right.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Is there any matters arising from the previous meeting? All content? Okay, moving on to correspondence. At page 15, you'll see the correspondence memo. At page 73, you'll see the correspondence from the Department for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs in response to a request for further information following a briefing by the Northern Ireland Environment Agency on the 5th of March. So are members content with the response, or is there any more information that you would require? You content?
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Is that, sorry, Chair, the response there on page 73?
Yeah.
I was quite interested towards the end, one of the last paragraphs. Is it possible maybe to forward this across to the Department for Infrastructure? I mean, it points out that the majority of the issue actually stems from wastewater infrastructure, so I think it would be very interesting for them to be made aware of that.
What paragraph are you referring to there?
It was page 76, towards the end there.
Yeah, what paragraph?
The last paragraph.
Yeah. So in relation to the
50% of the total load to Belfast Lock, and then 90% overloading under the lock. Without further improvements in wastewater infrastructure, the ecological and bacterial status of the lock is likely to deteriorate further. So that stems back from the issues in terms of Northern Ireland water. So I think quite interesting to raise that with the Minister.
Yeah. So you want to check in with the Minister to see if she's aware of that piece of data, and to seek an update in terms of what the department is doing in relation to it.
Yeah.
Members, are you content with that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. At page 79, you'll see correspondence from the Committee for the Economy proposing a joint concurrent meeting on the 17th of September. Are you content that we do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Chair, I just check on that. I mean, learning from other experiences, but I've heard there's been some joint committees and some, the format has worked well, but just take a wee bit of advice from other clerks to see how we can learn from it. But
Maybe
I don't mind the principle of it, yeah.
Maybe check in with the Minister on it as well, in terms of what's going on behind the scenes. I think I proposed the medical fitness to drive one, and obviously the conversations are taking place at the ministerial level, so that'd be interesting to check in there. Obviously we have the Minister in front of us in the next 2 weeks. So.
We have the Minister up on the 25th of June.
Okay, so the next month.
Yeah, so I mean, I think obviously we're in the process of gathering together, you know, details and things like that in terms of who will be in front. So, and we're checking in with various groups as well. I remember the UFU were up before whenever we had the joint meetings. So, and of course the Minister will be up on the 25th of June. So, you know, we will. I have no doubt we'll be asking questions around the A5 when the Minister's up as well. So we can play that one by ear if you're happy enough. But we will have further details obviously coming out in terms of structure and everything of that meeting and how
It's just something, it can be a bit hit and miss sometimes how to get the format right, but just take me a bit of advice.
No, I completely take your point, Cathal. Okay, at page 80, you'll see correspondence from the House of Lords, Northern Ireland Scrutiny Committee, to the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland regarding an EU regulation on the emission type approval procedures for light passenger and commercial vehicles. So, are you in agreement that we, in the first instance, forward this correspondence to the Department for comment on this? Content? Yeah. Okay, thank you. At page 83, you'll see the request for an update on the position of Northern Ireland Water's finances following the scheduled evidence session on the 11th of June 2025. So, just seeking agreement that we provide the Committee for Finance with an update following our evidence session. Are you content? Yeah. Okay, at page 91, you'll see correspondence from the Department of Finance providing a copy of the detailed guidance given to departments to facilitate the production of their 5-year business plans. So just remind members that the committee is to receive a briefing from departmental officials on financial matters next week, 4th of June. And we may obviously wish to ask for an update on the progress of the 5-year business plan. So are you content with that? Yeah.
Right.
And then lastly, I just want to seek agreement that we're content to note the remaining correspondences contained in the correspondence memo in the pack and then in the table pack as well. Are you content? Yeah. Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to item 7, which is a consultation on the review of Trustport's Belfast Harbour Commissioners, and this is our oral evidence at page 133. You'll see Clark's memo, Belfast Harbour Commissioners. At page 135, you'll see the presentation on the Trustports. At page 152, you'll see the briefing paper from the Belfast Harbour Commissioners. And from pages 183 to 239, you'll see additional papers in relation to ports. So we welcome to the committee today. It feels a bit strange welcoming you to what is your own building. But we thank you for coming to us to give us evidence today. And we're looking forward to hearing from you. So, Dr. Teresa Donaldson, Chair, Mr. Joe O'Neill, Chief Executive, Mr. Maurice Bullock, Executive Director, Finance and Compliance, and Natasha Saee, Executive Director, Corporate Affairs and Engagement. So, thank you very much for having us today. We really appreciate the opportunity to have our committee here. This has been probably in a long time coming, but we're very glad to be here, and we thank you for your hospitality already today. So we have had quite extensive information sent over by yourselves, which we have read, and I'm aware that you have a presentation as well to go through. So I'll give about 10 minutes or so, if that's okay, and then I'll come to members' questions. So over to yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And hopefully we've timed this quite well, because we appreciate, you are very busy. You have a lot on today. So it's my pleasure to welcome you and the committee to Belfast Harbour. And I'm very pleased, as you've already indicated, to be joined by the Chief Executive, Joe O'Neill, who's to my left, to Natasha Saee, our Corporate Affairs Director, to my right, and to Maurice Bullock, who's our Finance Director. And I want to take the time to thank the committee for visiting us and to cover this subject with us, which is the review of trust supports legislation. We're encouraged that this important review is progressing, and we commend the Minister for pushing it forward in the way that she has done in a very, very busy schedule. And we want to also acknowledge the work of the officials in the Gateways team at the Department for Infrastructure for their work on the review to date. So the committee will be aware that this issue has been looked at extensively in the past. The groundwork's largely complete and is now over to the committee and the Minister for due consideration. But for the benefit of everyone in the region, it's our ask that the legislative process is concluded within the term of this Assembly mandate. I'm also very pleased that we're joined today by colleagues from Warren Point, Harbour, from Coleraine, and they're in the public gallery, and we want to thank them for their support. We were hoping that Foyle Port would join us as well, but unfortunately they weren't able to make it today. And also want to acknowledge that members of the DF, Department for Infrastructure drafting team, are in the public gallery as well. So we've been working collaboratively with all of Northern Ireland Trust Ports and are aligned on this issue. It's a modernised legislative framework, and it would allow each of us to do even more for our customers, our communities, our towns and our cities. And for those members joining us on a port tour this afternoon, we will be, you'll get first-hand the regeneration, transformation and innovation at Belfast Harbour. So as you said, Chair, 10 minutes, and we'll try and keep to that timescale. So I want to say at the outset today, we're not asking the committee for anything other than the support of legislative change that will enable us in Belfast Harbour Commission to do more. So we want to do more for the people of Belfast and beyond. And we're not asking for money because, I mean, you've already mentioned wastewater, and we know you have a lot of responsibilities, and we know that there is a huge draw on public finance. So that's not an ask today. So once again, you're very welcome to Belfast Harbour, and it's apt that this session's being held here in the historic Harbour office. This building, which we take care of for the city and for the next generation, sits at a crossroads. On one side, we have the port, which is the engine room of the economy, and just to mention a few things, a few achievements, a few things that the port is doing. So 70% of Northern Ireland's seaborne trade and 25% of seaborne trade for the island flows through Belfast Harbour. Having welcomed the first cruise ship to Belfast in 1996, Belfast Harbour is now the busiest cruise port on the island and the second busiest in the UK, second only to Southampton. Cruise tourism from Belfast is worth an estimated 25 million to the local economy each year. We think that's an underestimate, and we'll be doing some work later in the year to accurately estimate what we are bringing in through cruise. So in terms of trade, we are the 9th largest port in the UK, and our core business continues to be resilient. We're the only port on the island with purpose-built facilities to support the offshore wind sector. And last month we announced the single biggest investment in our history, which was £90 million for a new dual-purpose deep-water berth to accommodate some of the largest cruise ships in the world and for the assembly and installation of the next generation of offshore wind turbines. But on the other side of the channel, on the crossroads that I mentioned, we have the estate, which is home to 760 businesses, including the FDI enabling and ESG leading City Key scheme with marquee tenants such as Aflac, Baker McKenzie and Santander. And what once was Mudflats now stands Titanic Belfast, George Best Belfast City Airport, Catalyst, Belfast Metropolitan College and Belfast Harbour Studios. Northern Ireland Screen estimates the production spend with us in recent years have delivered 200 million in the local economy. Belfast Harbour Studios is also home to the first Belfast Regional City Deal project to be realised, the world-leading virtual reality production facility, Studio Ulster. We're growing a welcoming and vibrant community. Around 1,000 people will be living here by this time next year, and that could grow to some 10,000 within a decade. We're taking steps to ensure this is an inclusive place and a safe place also, and we're supported by Belfast Harbour Police on this objective. And to support our communities in the charity sector, we donate 1% of our operating profits each year to grassroots community projects, amounting to about 3.5 million over the past 10 years. And you may have seen the newly opened City Keys Gardens on your way in this morning. the first One Planet Living accredited project in Northern Ireland. It's a green space for everyone to enjoy, and you'll see it later if you haven't seen it already. So just to say a bit about our trust port status, these transformational projects didn't just happen. The success of Belfast Harbour is down to a handful of key factors. And one unique factor is our 2,000-acre landholding, which we're utilising to its full extent to benefit Northern Ireland. Our people, our employees, the leadership team and my board colleagues, all of whom are dedicated to making a difference. And while we're an independent statutory authority, we proactively implement government policy, whether it's the drive to net zero, providing affordable housing, or supporting a globally competitive economy. We are key enablers of policy, and our new 5-year strategy, Advance Regional Prosperity, is carefully aligned to the Programme for Government, the Belfast Agenda and Belfast Local Development Plan. Our commercial strategy is thoughtfully balanced between port and estate, combined with prudent financial management and robust governance. Over the past decade, we have invested $374 million in key infrastructure projects, and during the next 5 years, we will invest a further $313 million. All of this is generated from our profit and from our cash reserves, without public money, as I've said earlier. And to be very clear, we're not asking for public money, again, to repeat that. Our partnerships and transparency are critical for us. In the absence of Northern Ireland Ports governance guidance, we voluntarily worked to the Department for Transport's Ports Good Governance Guidance 2018, which represents the gold standard in public accountability, including the publication of KPIs and accounts. We have a Port Users Forum, a joint project board with Belfast City Council. We hold an AGM and business briefings with the Infrastructure Minister and scheduled review meetings with the Department for Infrastructure. And we've welcomed representatives from all political parties throughout the year. That's a rolling programme, and we'll be starting again this year to issue invites. Our innovation, there are really exciting things happening here. We're piloting automation to make the port safer and more efficient. And tomorrow we officially launch the road trials for the Harlander autonomous shuttle bus. And the final success factor is our trust port status. This means there are no shareholders, so all post-tax profits generated by the Belfast Harbour are reinvested for the benefit of our stakeholders. And to be clear, we value that status. There's nothing in the proposed legislation that will alter our trust port status. We're working with the University of Ulster Economic Policy Centre to fully understand our overall positive impact on the local economy. But I hope you'll see from this overview that we are an effective trust port. We do want to do even more, and we need a modernised legislative framework to allow us to do so. So the Trust Ports Review then, it's more than 20 years since the Office for National Statistics changed the accounting classifications of all UK trust ports from private to public corporations for accounting purposes only. This change linked trust port borrowing to public expenditure, which means that in Belfast Harbour's case, if we were to use our existing powers to borrow up to $45 million by a loan from a bank, it counts against the Department for Infrastructure's budget. And even though no public money is involved, it would have that impact on the resource you have available to you. So that's not something we want to be doing. We need legislative change to enable ONS to reclassify all Northern Ireland trust ports, bringing up departmental expenditure at a time of highly constrained public finances, reducing nugatory bureaucracy, freeing up officials to do more of what matters, and giving us the flexibility to prudently borrow to finance projects to benefit the economy, society and environment. So it's worth noting that in 2015, the Scottish Executive implemented legislative change which enabled ONS to reclassify Scottish trust ports back to private corporations for accounting purposes only. And we believe it's time that Northern Ireland trust ports had the same opportunity to compete and grow. While ONS reclassification will be a game changer for Northern Ireland trust ports, it's important that I briefly mention the other legislative changes we are seeking, which will have a positive impact on our operations. So firstly, commercial powers. Department for Infrastructure is proposing clarifying and widening trust ports' commercial powers. This change would bring us in line with ports in Ireland and GB, putting us on a more competitive footing. Secondly, new and amending harbour orders, again bringing us in line with GB, would mean that Northern Ireland trust ports are able to do the heavy lifting on the drafting, consulting and legal scrutiny. of new harbour orders or those that need amended, making the process more efficient and reducing the burden on the Department for Infrastructure. And finally, marine safety. Throughout everything we do, safety is always our priority. We support the introduction of a power to give legislative power for us to give directions to ships and other vessels, helping us as we continue to prioritise safety and bringing Northern Ireland Trust ports in line with ports in GB. So in closing my introduction, I'm proud to be chair of this organisation which is delivering so much for the region and its people today through our safe, competitive, innovative and successful operations. And like this committee, we are working towards a better future for Northern Ireland. Belfast Harbour can be an even greater force for good if enabled by a modernised legislative framework. We are pleased to have the support of Belfast City Council, key institutions such as Queen's University and the backing of major business bodies, as well as broad support from our customers and partner organisations. They all recognise that this is a good news story for the region, unlocking the potential of Northern Ireland Trust ports and what we can achieve for the economy. We hope you will support the legislative change needed and ensure the process is concluded within the term of this Assembly. So thank you, Chair, and myself and my team will address any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Super, thank you so much. And I suppose for ourselves as MLAs, question that it's not budget or anything like that there that we're hearing about today. So, but what it does relate to is obviously future investment and the economy, which is a major thing as well. And whilst we're not the Department for Economy, it does hugely tie in with that, and we recognise that infrastructure is a key enabler for that. So it's important that this is right and that it works for the ports as well, and that's what we'll be doing in terms of our scrutiny along the passage of this. And I recognise the importance, given that it has been so long and so long in the making. So as a committee, we're keen to make sure that the legislation is not legislation for legislation's sake, but it does actually work for everybody on the ground. So, look, I was just looking through the wealth of information that you've given to the committee, but I wanted to check in just in relation to if you were sitting where we're sitting and you're looking at the pros and the cons of the legislation, and I suppose what would you say? Do you have any concerns with the current ONS classification? What would be, I suppose, the pros then of this new classification coming in?
So yeah, we do have major concerns, Chair, about the current classification by ONS because it does restrict our borrowing. We can't leverage the assets. We have a very significant asset base. But we're relying on our profits coming through the port to do all of the things that you can see around you. And as I said in my presentation, we think we can do more. And a simple accounting treatment is what's preventing us from doing that. So we don't see any downside to that reclassification. And certainly we would be working very closely with the department, as we do already, that if there were any concerns coming from government, we would address those with our departmental officials as the process progresses, and we're doing that already. So we only see advantages, and when you look around this port, and you'll see more when we go out in the pilot boat later, of what we're achieving with £90 million new berth for cruise and for offshore. So it'll be our second offshore wind berth for floating offshore that we've been able to make that investment. And with ONS reclassification, we will be able to do more of those projects. We want this place to be an inviting, safe place for people to come and live. And you've heard me saying within the next decade, we could have 10,000 people living in this area. Mm-hmm. So there's a huge responsibility on us to develop the area along with our government officials and strategic partners in a way that it will be appropriate for people to come and live and work. Mm-hmm. So there's a big ask on the port and the harbour in terms of what we feel we need to do over the next period. And the only way, really, of achieving our advanced regional prosperity strategy is by having that ONS reclassification. If we don't get it, the downside is we're restricted then in terms of what we can achieve for the people of Northern Ireland. And as I said, we recognise that, I mean, the pressure on public resource is huge. We're not seeking to put a further burden on public resource. So ourselves and the other trust ports would be actually growing the cake, if you like. You know, we will be contributing to the economy. We won't be taking anything out. And I don't think there's very many bodies coming before this committee, or indeed any committee, that are able to say that. So unfortunately, I can't see any downside. And if any problems have been flagged up during the consultation, we're happy to address them. But we only see the advantages of reclassification for the people of Northern Ireland, for us, and as I said, and for the other trust ports.
Thank you. I mean, you said there about 313 million will be invested in the next 5 years, and you've already, as we have seen through the evidence that you've provided, and obviously we can see as well, we'll be seeing that later, you've already made huge strides in terms of investment here in this area. And when you were talking there about mud flats and what it used to look like, and this area has completely transformed, which is amazing. But I mean, under the existing legislation, what specific barriers have you seen in relation to the potential further growth investment? Because you've talked there a lot about you're going to be looking at autonomous vehicles, things like that, an awful lot of things coming through. But you're bound to have faced barriers as a result. I'm only imagining, given the evidence that you've provided of the existing legislation, have you had to pause or stop certain projects as a result of that? Yeah.
Chair, I'm going to bring up our Port Master Plan, which we're currently working on. I'm going to bring in the Chief Executive to say a bit about the Port Master Plan, which we're currently preparing. We haven't gone into a lot of detail in it in this presentation because it's something we'll come back before you at a future stage to talk in more detail, but you'll be very excited about it. I mean, it's looking towards 2050 in terms of what we will be wanting to develop. But there will be huge cost, and there is huge cost to even just maintaining the port. So we have a lot of exciting projects in the Advanced Regional Prosperity Strategy, which we will be able to fund. But there's a lot of other things that the port will need to do just to keep going over the next 10 years that a reclassification would enable us to do. Joe, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we've got immediate, then near term, and then some medium term challenges with the current classification and limitations of the classification. The 313 million figure that you referred to there, which is our projected capital spend for the next 5 years, it's a slightly unusual number, you may say. We didn't round it up or down. It is quite specific because we've had a look at what is our existing cash balance going into this 5 year period, and what do we anticipate will be our earnings or surplus post-tax over that 5 year period. And effectively, we've sought to utilise all of those resources, financial or fiscal resources, to reinvest back into the harbour. About 200 million, 208 million of it is for port developments, including that large 90 million project that the Chair referred to, and then 105 for the estate. But in being targeted with those proposed investments, we've had to leave a number of other projects by the side, which we cannot develop at this time, but would dearly love to. So the most immediate project is a project we call City Quays 4. It's a project we've already got consent for on the waterfront beside the AC by Marriott Hotel for 256 apartments with an accompanying 69 affordable and social houses on 2 sites within the adjoining Sailortown. That's ready to go. There's a market demand for that product. We have full consents in place. We have early engagement with the contractor, but we are unable to proceed with that because we've committed all of our near-term finances to supporting the development of that £90 million quay for cruise and offshore wind. But had we not this limitation on access to our existing legislation for 45 million or perhaps a higher sum, we would be currently on site delivering that product. We would also be on site delivering a number of logistics warehouses. That's part of our bread and butter. As a Port Authority, we develop large-scale logistics warehouses for the major transport and supply chain companies. Again, we're unable to do that because we've committed 90, correctly so and importantly so, the 90 million to that deepwater D3 quay. And we cannot foresee a point over the next 3-4 years where we'll have enough cash to invest in further warehousing. Then the big one coming up, as the Chair said, in the medium term, is the new master plan, which we are finalising and will publish early next year. That's taking a look at what's the capacity that we need to provide to support the growth of the economy over the next 20 to 25 years out to 2050, and then some of the other related projects that we want to deliver. What the early findings are from that master plan work is that we will have to make some significant investment in some of the older areas of the port where we handle bulk trade. Our largest quay here, Deepwater Quay, is a quay called Stormont Wharf, where all of the grain and animal feeds comes in, an important element of the food supply chain. That's a 1960s asset. We will need to reinvest and to rebuild it, and likelihood is accompanying deepening of the channel. That'll be a major capital expenditure project. We foresee that we will need to borrow to be able to deliver that project and a number of others in the master plan. And if you like, this effort to push through the legislation change now to get an ONS reclassification is us anticipating a demand for borrowing, a greater demand for borrowing in 4 or 5 years' time. I think maybe just one other perhaps reference point for you, 313 million in 5 years against 374 million over the previous 10. That hopefully reflects an accelerated spend. That's for 2 reasons. The cost of delivering capital projects in the port environment has escalated phenomenally. You can hear, you just heard us talking about 90 million for a single quay. Most infrastructure projects that we're looking at now are at least 50 million pounds. So construction inflation, delivery inflation is contributing to individual cost prices going up for our major projects, and then we have a wider array of projects than we perhaps had in recent times because of that focus we've had on socio-economic delivering projects across the estate, as well as the port.
Thank you for that. That just shows how much investment is going into the area and around about. But obviously you referenced about Warrenpoint Harbour and Foyle as well, and I'm sure there's a lot of collaborative work that goes on together in relation to that. So what specific issues have been identified through the Commissioner's collaborative work with other trust ports in Northern Ireland, and do the issues vary obviously between obviously the locations and other related issues, because it is about looking at investment in these different areas for different reasons as well.
So I should reference Coleraine Port or
yes,
here in the public gallery. They're all very different. I think I'll kick off the answer to that. I mean, the ports are all very different and have different aspirations. So we wouldn't want to speak for the other ports because they will probably want to address you themselves. But there's no doubt the enhanced borrowing powers would benefit all of the trust ports, and they're all supportive of this legislative change. And of course, on the other elements of the legislation that I've mentioned already. So I don't know what anybody wants to add.
Yeah, listen, there's been great collaboration so far. Without speaking too much on behalf of the other ports, I think we find ourselves all on the same page here. I can't recollect any point of dissonance in any meeting. And those areas of commonality around the desire to have access to our existing legislative ability to borrow, but not choosing to do so because of the impediment that would create for the department's budget. Hopefully an enhanced level of borrowing to reflect construction escalation for large projects. We're all at one as well, in particular our harbour masters, individual harbour masters, are all at one around implementing this power to direct legislation for safe marine control, something which all the other ports in GB enjoy. It's a quirk of legislation that hasn't been implemented here. We'd like to see that happening as well. And then, as you've heard, we're a statutory body. We rely on legislation. Some of that is quite dated and probably was drafted at a time that doesn't reflect modern day business opportunities and methodologies for delivering those opportunities. And collectively, we're asking for some modernisation of some of our commercial powers. So I think we're all at one and on the same page in this regard.
I do just want to ask one question before I come to other members. It's not related to this particular legislation, but obviously related to the investment that you hope to make, and that's in relation to housing, which this committee is very aware of in terms of the capacity issues that you face around NI Water. And I suppose in terms of your plans going forward, how much does that impede your plans going forward? It may be all well and good to have plans shovel ready, but if we don't have the capacity there, and as we know, Belfast Lock with the pollution incidents that are there as well, it's a key concern too. Could you maybe touch on that in terms of your engagement with NI Water and the department around that, because that is, I suppose, it will impact your plans.
Yes, happy to do so. So we can just give the strategic context for this one first, if you don't mind, which is under the Belfast agenda, Belfast plan, there's 31,600 new homes envisaged to be within the city by 2035. 3,600 of those homes are envisaged to be in the Harbour estate, roughly 2,900 within the Titanic Quarter area, and then a further 600-700 in the immediacy of this office. So the lion's share of the ambition is over in Titanic Quarter. The master plan for Titanic Quarter some 10 years ago did consider what the infrastructure requirements would be to deliver that magnitude of housing. We own and manage and invest in the sewage infrastructure throughout the Harbour estate. So our own systems and network, both in Titanic Quarter and over here, have the capacity for that development. Where the issue is where that then connects at the boundaries into the NI Water system. However, NI Water, there's been a substantial piece of work with NI Water as part of that master planning consent to look at what's their capacity at that intake point where the two systems match, and NI Water are comfortable that there is capacity for the near-term plans. If we were to expand beyond that, and I think there's a recognition that we could accommodate further residential in the estate, we would need to sit down with NI Water at that point and look at what does that generate by way of further demand on their infrastructure and how that would need to be addressed. But the near-term delivery aspirations can be catered for by our own existing infrastructure and the connectivity into NI Waters.
Okay, I'm going to come to other members now. Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And folks, can I just echo the Chair's praise for welcoming us here today? I think it's a fantastic building, and also great to see representatives from the other trust ports here today. And just to praise the work that you do and both the social and economic impact, and not just Belfast, but across Northern Ireland PLC. I think it is fantastic, and the innovation and also the ambition and the scale you've described today and throughout Northern Ireland with the other ports is really exciting. And just to place on record, I have absolutely no problem with what it is that is trying to be achieved. Obviously, there would be the devil be in the detail of the legislation itself, and we will come to that and we will scrutinise it properly. But the general principles of what we're trying to achieve, I believe we're all in that together. That being said, there are some detractors out there, and we maybe heard commentary around the consultation process. So my first question is around that. What would you say to those who are trying to suggest that this legislative change is privatisation by the back door, and can you set out why that is not the case?
Well, through the Chair, I've already mentioned, and it stated at the outset, that our trust port status will not be changed.
Yep.
As a board, I mean, I'm speaking for my board colleagues, but for the leadership team as well. I mean, but I'm going to embarrass them, but Joe and Morris, between them, have over 50 years' experience of this place. It is a huge advantage, in my view, that we have that status. And I've worked a lot in different local government, different other public sector organisations, and in the voluntary sector. It's one of the great strengths of these ports is that we have that status, which means the port doesn't belong to anybody, and in my view, that means it belongs to everybody.
Absolutely.
So there is absolutely there's nothing in the legislation that will bring privatisation onto the table for any of our ports. Yeah. Now, obviously, Larne's a different
yes.
It's not represented here today, but the trust ports will remain trust ports. There's no suggestion to change that. That change, if were it ever to come about, would come through yourselves.
Yeah.
It would not come from us, and in fact, we would strongly oppose any suggestion because we see the strengths of the trust port model and we would desperately want to retain that.
Excellent. Yep, that's what I thought. The consultation finished earlier this year. I'm just wondering if you had any follow-up with the department on the back of that consultation as to how the drafting of the legislation will begin to look and how that process is going. And as an add-on to that, I mean, how key is it that we get this done within the current mandate?
I'm going to, if you don't mind, bring Morris Willock to address that point.
Well, we have been engaging. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the question. So, yes, we have been engaging with the department. So that particular function that you described on the development of the draft legislation sits squarely within the purview of the department. Mm-hmm. So we've had initial engagement on that, and I think they're better placed to answer that in detail. But from what we understand, there is a prescribed process to go through, and there's a sequence of events, and there's an order of things happening. So what we'll be doing from our perspective is putting any sort of informal early input into the department just to give some thoughts to them. But I think the prescribed format requires the Minister's approval, the executive approval, Office for Legislative Council engagement. And I think whilst we might offer to assist, I think it's important that we allow that process to run the way it's meant to run. But most certainly we will be engaging. They've already kindly provided us with the draft legislation from the last time this was done back in 2009. For the most part, it seems largely fit for purpose, but there are a few areas that we want to develop. But you understand we'll be getting ahead of ourselves a little bit at this stage of the committee, because the committee, I'm sure, will want to examine the detail when it is available, and it is not yet available. So hopefully that's the best way I can answer.
That's good to know. Given though, just how essential this legislation is to allow the opportunities to open up, do you agree with me that it is essential that we do all we can and the department does all it can to get it done within the mandate before 2027?
Again, through the chair, that is critical. And I mean, as official, as ministers and MLA better than me, if it doesn't complete in this legislative timetable, I mean, it's just going to go way into the future because you don't know what's going to come at you in the next mandate. For Northern Ireland, as I said, there aren't many bodies sitting before you bringing resource, and that's what this legislative change will do. From all the trust ports, it will grow our ability to put more into the pot. We like you, we desperately think this is an important opportunity for the people of Northern Ireland. And if we don't make the timescales, and I know there's a lot of pressures on the minister and on yourselves, but if we don't make that, then we've missed that opportunity, and we just don't know for how long. If you look back, 2009 was the last time this was attempted, and it ran out of time, is our understanding.
Yes.
We're really hoping that doesn't happen again, but that's all we can do. We're in your hands, and we're in the minister's hands, and obviously the Assembly's hands in that matter. Just
one more area then, Chair, if I may. Might stretch to two. One of the only good things I think often about being last when we come to change, given elsewhere in the UK has done this already, is that we can learn from anything that went well and maybe little pitfalls that happened elsewhere. Is there anything we can learn from the legislative changes that happened in England and Scotland that you referred to? Whenever they were doing the reclassification legislation, or was it pretty plain sailing in that respect?
If you don't mind, I'm going to bring Morrison again.
So, yes, all the trust ports in Scotland were reclassified back in the year 2015. There was Harbour Scotland Act 2015, so their legislative process went through the same process of explanatory memorandum. Same things really applied. It was all to do with modernising the legislation with a view to removing the ONS classification and also to enable the borrowing, to enable greater investment. So the same themes were there. Those organisations such as Aberdeen and the others, they were trust ports before, they're trust ports after. So again, going back to the question about the sale of the port, that just didn't apply.
Yes.
The constitutional arrangements are still determined by legislation, which means the Assembly and all of that. So, that it's a well-trodden process, and it's not, there's nothing novel or contentious in what we're proposing. Of course, it is dependent on the ONS classification itself.
Yes.
Because the Harbour Scotland Act, I think, is December 2015, and I think it was much later in 2016 that the classification decision took place. So that's an independent process, and obviously, we would assume or presume that will follow the same path.
Mm-hmm. And you talked finally about the anomaly of the safety aspect around that and the ability to compel. I think, Mr. O'Neill, you referred to just how important that is and accept that safety is paramount. Can you just talk us finally through how those changes will open up even more safety options for the harbour itself and controlling ships and boats in the area?
Yeah, that's quite a specific piece of legislation. So just to create wider context, Department of Transport has a code, the Port Marine Safety Code. I recently changed the Port Marine Safety and Facilities Code, which is the strong guidance that all ports must adhere to in respect of marine safety. And on an annual basis, we're obligated to have an independent audit for compliance against that, which we do on an annual and rigorous basis. And one of the findings we've had for quite a number of years, and I imagine it's the same for other trust ports, is that we're unable to demonstrate full compliance with that code because our respective harbour masters and the organisation doesn't have the ability to compel and issue instructions in a general fashion for marine traffic. So just to clarify, if there is a specific vessel which is behaving in a manner which we're not comfortable with or in an untoward manner, the harbour master has the ability to engage directly with that vessel. But this is in a wider power where the Harbour Master and his team wishes to promote general legislation and directions around how vessels should behave in the entirety of the harbour. That is missing from our capabilities today.
Yep.
It exists in all other GB ports. It actually exists, again, through a slight quirk of legislation, exists in the Port of Larne. It doesn't exist for the trust ports. So hoping it's a non-contentious matter.
Yep.
It's bringing us into full compliance in this specific area with the Port Marine Safety Code and full alignment with all the other ports, both in NI, if I include Larne, and then across GB.
Okay, no, that's all for me. Thank you again for having us today for your responses.
Super, thank you. Cathal?
Thanks, Chair. Chair, you bring us to all the nicest places.
I know.
Don't get used to it, Cal.
Infrastructure gets all the
See
good
what
gigs.
You know, thanks very much for the presentation. I was sitting here because I remember the first visit was way back in 2009 and the ports it had at that time, the downturn in the economy, the less building materials and all come in and that discussion. Right? But I want to pick up on 3 points if I can. I mean, obviously, yes, there's responsibility in terms of ourselves and the legislation. I mean, for my sins, I've done a lot of it. But I think in this process, there's been a lot of conversation for a long time. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's cut and dried, but there's stuff there already we can work on. And the sooner, obviously, we get to look at it, and we will thoroughly interrogate it and scrutinise. That's the role of the committee. But I just want to ask the simple question. I mean, if it doesn't, and I'm mindful it's Hansard, Chair, because there's my own minister, and there's officials here, but in terms of it doesn't move quickly, the ramifications of that, from your point of view.
Well, I think we have tried through our presentation to show what the port is capable of, and we've said we would like to do more. So we certainly wouldn't be doing any more than what we've set out. So that's the first ramification. And Joe was mentioned, and I'm going to bring my colleagues in to respond because I think it's an important question. The Port Master Plan, which you haven't seen and we will be bringing forward, and it will come before this committee, and it is very detailed and really exciting. But it is about maintaining the port into the future because we've inherited, an amazing asset. When you look around this building, the amount of investment that's gone on over centuries into this area is what Belfast grew out of. So we have a responsibility to maintain that and to make sure it lasts. That's the one responsibility, the biggest responsibility the Harbour Commissioners have, to secure this wonderful asset for future generations. So our ability to do that would be impeded because we know there are issues, and Joe's mentioned Stormont Wharf. I mean, to build a wharf, you're talking about 100 million. Mm-hmm. So for our ability to ensure Stormont Wharf has the capability that it will need to have going forward into the future for future generations, that would be impeded. So that's a huge, I think, disadvantage for the next generation coming forward, that we had an opportunity to do something about this and we just simply weren't able to do it. So not bringing forward the legislation in the timescale would have that impact on the port. And I think the other thing is that the innovation, if you look at what's coming out of this place in terms of innovation, we have the only berth that's on this island that's capable of offshore wind assembly. And that's because of the ability to invest. We simply will not have that ability to be innovative. We will deliver what we've set out in our strategy. But anything else, the money simply won't be there. And so it would be a huge missed opportunity. Joe, do you want to add?
No, I think you've clearly stated, actually. Probably just add a couple of comments. It would be substantially around the impact on delivering our master plan. That's hugely important that we make those early year investments in our master plan, from the importance of port capacity and supporting the economy. I would envisage a situation where we will then have to look very closely at our investment plans if they are constrained and curtail as much as we can in order to fund the master plan projects, including in particular the Stormont Wharf rebuild. And a consequence of that is we wouldn't be able to do the other development projects such as residential, such as the logistics warehouse I talked about, and a new office scheme that we have planning consent for just immediately across from this building. And if the market opportunity is there, we would like to deliver it as well. All of that would have to wait in abeyance because we would prioritise correctly so the investment in the master plan But even that, some of the early numbers coming out for what it may cost for to deliver the master plan between 2030 and 2040 are very significant. That would clearly consume all of our generated surplus on an annual basis.
And just on that, I mean, because the chair mentioned it's an important thing. I mean, you have the capacity to build here and deliver. You know, we're crying out NAW invest and everything else. So, I mean, we can't grow the economy. You know, there's a lot of opportunities, and I have no qualms with that. And the other 2 points is, one's on the shared island fund. Can you talk a wee bit more about that? Or
Yeah. Well, I suppose just to say it's a very exciting opportunity, and we're working with Cork Port to see if it's possible to avail of it. It would be, I mean, if we were successful, it would enhance the work we're doing already at what we call D3, which is where we're building our new quay for cruise ships and for floating offshore. So it would enhance that project. It won't stop the project happening, but we'd be able to do more with the project. And I mean, the process of obtaining shared island funding is not an easy one, and we've spoken to other institutions in the north who've availed of it. I mean, the University of Ulster have been successful. But we rely very heavily on government departments, particularly the Department for Economy, who are leading on this and liaising with their counterparts in Dublin. So we're hoping that we succeed, and if we do, it does mean we would have a much better product at the end of our D3 work. The 90 million, we would add the 40/50 onto that, 50 million euro, and we would have a much better landing base for, I mean, the offshore, the turbines, when you've seen, they're huge structures and they need a lot of reinforced land on which to be placed. So that's the piece of the project that we would be enhancing. Joe, I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, so it's quite unique what we're proposing here for this new quay where we can handle cruise, but also offshore wind. To be clear, the offshore wind it's floating offshore wind, which is anticipated to come to be the primary means of offshore wind generation from 2030 onwards for sites which are further off the coastline. And secondly, in our case, it is for foundations for floating offshore wind, where we see the opportunity to create a combined use of the quay. Offshore wind projects are just getting so big nowadays that the developers are not comfortable concentrating all of their assembly and installation in one port. They're usually looking to spread it across 2 ports. We can see a situation, a clear opportunity with the Port of Cork, where we can provide the foundation support for delivering the foundations for the large floating offshore wind farms. And then Cork will have the capacity through their investment to facilitate the other components, namely the towers and the turbines and the blades. Why we're asking for shared island funding is it's about a 40 to 50 million pound upgrade, which will be necessary by 2030. We don't have it, funds to do so. Secondly, it's a relatively early stage project in terms of commerciality of it, and no ports are really committing to supporting floating offshore wind at this early stage. But if we can get some funding support collectively for shared island for ourselves in Cork, we can get an early mover advantage to be able to position ourselves collectively to respond to the floating offshore opportunity.
No doubt you had that conversation with the minister was here.
Yes.
Yeah, and we are obviously meeting with the Economy Committee as joint, isn't it? We'll have a conversation with some of our colleagues from you. Yeah. Sorry.
May I, Cal? Thank you through the chair. Thank you. I just wanted to add as well that we have had very strong ministerial support from the Infrastructure Minister and the Economy Minister on this issue, and both their predecessors as well. So that has been very helpful in terms of their engagement with the Department for Transport in the South, who are leading on this, and with the Taoiseach's office as well, and with broad support as well from the Executive Office, particularly through the North-South Ministerial Council, through our colleagues at DFI who are here today and DFE who are leading this. So, the region's officials and the region's ministers are behind us. It's just now about getting through the administrative process and coming out the other side in terms of what we would hope would be a really collaborative and game-changing funding opportunity for both ports.
No, absolutely. John, final question, definitely.
Very quickly,
That's not a part too. Just, and I'm keen on the tourism product. I know it doesn't extend out to the beautiful constituency of Newry and Armagh, but it would I'd hope at some point you're saying 300,000 there. I mean, that's a big capacity. I mean, that's fairly grown. So the opportunities in that in terms of on an all-island basis, I mean, that's so one of your views maybe in that. I'm not saying come to Armagh all the time, but maybe encourage people.
Yeah. So through the chair, cruise passengers do travel, when they come into the port, and they don't all go to the Giant's Causeway. I mean, although obviously a lot of them do.
You have plenty of water over there, so good enough there.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that is the thing, and what we're told by the cruise operators, that people love coming to Northern Ireland, and it's because we have so much to offer. When people are on a cruise, getting off the vessel and getting out and about is the big part of the offering, and we have so much to offer. So, I mean, I think we had contact last year with Tourism NI, and one of the companies that comes into Northern Ireland, we're going to have further contact. I mean, obviously, we have ongoing contact with their officers, but Joe and myself, we are having another meeting with them this year with Belfast City Council. So they want to grow. I mean, the vessels coming in want to see different offerings because people will come back. And I suppose the other thing about a cruise is people will use a cruise to test out an area. We've probably done it ourselves, and then go back to explore it in more detail. So there is an opportunity when people come here, because Northern Ireland's a small place. Everywhere actually is travel. I mean, including, I'm not going to say you can go to Derry Londonderry from Belfast, because I don't think they just want to hear that. They want the cruise ships to go into them, which of course they're doing. But you can explore a lot of Northern Ireland just coming into Belfast if the transport arrangements are there. So there is a piece in terms of public transportation and facilitating that travel for people visiting through the port that perhaps you might want to look at. But certainly the will is there, and there are a lot of people coming in through here, and they are out and about. We were hearing, I mean, they go to Mount Stewart, for example, is really a beautiful place, very important. I mean, any stately home, Hillsborough Castle, they love to get out and about. So there are opportunities, I would think, for Armagh and for Mana, beautiful parts of our lovely country. So why not? But the facilitation and the the transportation is the issue. I don't know. Do you want to add anything?
No, just to say it is a fantastic opportunity. Hopefully, it's one that grows further as we cater for more so-called transit calls that come in, say, in the morning and leave in the evening. Where our particular area focus is for so-called turnaround cruises, where people will actually embark on a cruise from here, spend a couple of nights in the city or the region beforehand, do a 7-10 day cruise, and then return and hopefully spend a few days here. We don't. Whilst we clearly facilitate the berthing of the cruise liners, we don't plan their excursions. The cruise companies do that with their contracted shore excursion company. Always an opportunity to present, any region to present to those shore excursions companies and departments around their local opportunities. But there are excursions today that do go to Fermanagh and do go to Armagh City, for example. But it's a matter of getting yourself in contact.
We're quickly going into the Department of Economy's remit here.
No, I was just saying it's part of the overall.
I don't want to
package.
step on toes.
Obviously, it's engaged with council, but the fine chair here. Thank you.
So just through our comms, because we're making sure that we get the information out. Do you want to mention anything?
Yes, we're engaged in a partnership chair with Visit Belfast. So they support us, we support them in terms of the marketing of Northern Ireland as a cruise destination as well, and that has proven very effective. So we are engaged in a collaborative partnership also with maybe the Chief Executive can speak more about Cruise Britain and Cruise Ireland as well.
But as you say, somebody to you, Chair, whether you want to go down that road.
Well, if you don't mind, I would like to try and bring it back to the trust ports, if that's okay.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the fact that it is linked in terms of the investment, but I'd be keen to try and drill in more to the trust port aspect. Keith, I'm relying on you now.
No, you don't rely on me.
On the trust port questions,
no, I don't know if you've ever done a costing on a deep water berth in Garrison, but we'll leave that.
It'll come.
To get from Mana tourism. No, I do want to go back to that, if I may, briefly, Chair. This deep water berth, I think that's the proper terminology, building at 90 million. What tipped the balance for you with respect to wind or tourism? So if I was saying to you, you're building that, and you're going to build that, is tourism more important to you, or the wind, and which is the balance of that? Would you say 60-40, 70-30? It's trying to get an understanding why you're building that. What's more important to you, and which is going to be the driver? Yeah.
So I'm going to start the answer to that, but my colleagues will add their perspectives. We actually don't make, as a port, we don't make hugely out of cruise. So in terms of a business case, that was one of the issues around the board table when we were looking at this issue. Cruise brings a huge amount to Northern Ireland. We've already talked about that. I mean, the number of visitors and the revenue opportunity and showcasing Northern Ireland. I mean, there's so many huge advantages for the province, but as a port, we don't make a huge amount of money out of it. So in terms of our income and, in terms of business case, the wind opportunity would outweigh the cruise. But we've recognised, and I suppose it is that important piece, that we're not a private sector business. We are, and we're not public sector, but we do belong to the people. And what we want to do, what we've striven to do, is do what's best for everybody in the sense of having the key stroke berth that will retain cruise, because we have a huge commercial opportunity moving into D1, downside of the port. So D1 was the berth that was already capable of offshore wind assembly. And when that project begins, cruise ships won't be able to come into that part of the port. So we recognise the need to move them, and that's where D3 comes in. But we also recognise a huge commercial opportunity for offshore wind, and particularly floating. And as the race to net zero escalates, and you can see that already, on the island, the facilities are very sparse, and yet there's a huge ambition to move in the energy transition that we're in, also the energy strategy coming from the Department of Economy. So there's a huge ambition, but not a lot of facilities to deliver on that ambition. So we wanted to ensure we played our part, and that's what we're doing. But there is a big commercial return. But we are a commercial entity, and we have to make sure that we operate as a commercial entity. That's the responsibility that sits with the port. So it was never an either or. But the business case for wind would definitely stack up better than cruise. Joe, do you want to come into that?
No, I think you've adequately covered.
You touched, Joe, on the bit about the two ports manufacturing the offshore wind or assembling, we'll call it what you wish. What's the reason for that? Is that a space thing? Could you not do all that? Is it purely, or is it a hedge bet? What's the issue?
There's a risk consideration by the developers, and then you're absolutely right, the scale needed. We're talking of pieces now which are upwards of 3,800 tonnes, 4,000 tonnes. The entry level ask from a developer when they come to us is of the order of 70 to 80 acres just to handle the components on a single port basis. So a port would need to have well over 100 acres to do an entire wind farm. We don't have that, and it can take you aside. Very few ports would, but even if we had, I think the developers would still take a look and say better to spread our risk across two ports. But we see our opportunity for floating to be in the foundations.
Okay, and if I may, you touched on the offshore wind and the tourism bit. Let's say the breakdown of that. Where do you see tourism heading? So you're going to build this new quay. What do you see it peaking at based on it's got a 25 million annual to the local economy as a figure? Where do you see it going?
Well, for a start, we're going to re-examine that figure, because what we see with a smaller number of visits from cruise ships into the port, the much bigger return
for the smaller ones.
For the lower number.
Okay.
So we are looking at that figure. We think already there's a lot more funding coming through the cruise sector than has been recognised, and certainly Belfast City Centre is really growing around the cruise visitors and welcoming them. I think that's important, because not every city does, and that's something that the cruise operators are very well aware of. But yeah, I don't know. Do you want to ask?
Yeah, I think we've been on record in this one before. We'd love to grow what is currently about 150 calls a year to 175 to 200 calls. Why do we put that limit on it? Two reasons. One, because of the size of cruise vessels, we're all aware of how big they're getting. We can only handle one large cruise vessel at a time on this new berth. And then the season isn't 12 months of the year. It generally is from probably late March through to late September, early October. So it's circa 200 days in a year in which you would get a cruise ship in. And if we get one for every day on that berth, that's sort of where the target market is for us.
Okay, and just quickly move on to a different subject quickly. Peter mentioned, maybe you heard him earlier, talking about Belfast Lock and obviously the sewage issues and that. Do you control or run any sewage treatment on your properties at all?
None whatsoever.
So all your waste is going to any water. So if you're going to build those houses, and you touched on it earlier, Joe, is that capacity there? Or are you going to have to bluntly put your hand in your pocket to assist DFI?
No, so the capacity is there from an NI water perspective where we connect in, particularly into Titanic Water. Yes, we will have to make an upgrade to one of our pumping stations into Titanic Water to deal with the proposed house build. That's somewhere of the order of £300,000 to £400,000 investment that we will do, because, just to repeat, we manage and invest in upgrade the sewage infrastructure network inside the estate, and we have an upgrade to do to one of our own pumping stations. But the work undertaken with NI Water around the time of master planning for Titanic Water indicated that they believe they have the headroom in that particular area to accept what's coming from our developments.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Chair.
Andrew?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the hospitality as well. It's it is impressive, just the history that you see around you and stuff. And anyway, just want to sort of two topics, maybe, if that makes sense. It was mentioned there about 95% of trade coming into Ireland is the island through ports, if you will, and given we're an island, it's not surprising, and probably isn't going to go anywhere. But just, and again, you've mentioned the renewables, as in the wind turbines being constructed. I suppose really just how does the port contribute sort of as a port entity to being renewable and sustainable in that sort of sector of the industry, but then also how does the port then, with these wider aspects of the construction, and does that trickle down to other port areas, again, and harbours within NI in order to sort of assist Northern Ireland? Yeah. So two questions in one, and being another one as well, Charles.
Well, I think we'll all chip into this. And I mentioned in my piece at the beginning that we produced the first port ESG strategy, that's environment, social and governance. So sustainability within the port is hugely important, and we have a lot of projects ongoing. I mean, one which is being launched tomorrow is the Harlander, which is an autonomous vehicle with no emissions. So that's going to be hugely important for sustainability and for the energy transition businesses that we have in the harbour. I mean, there's a very significant number. In fact, we brought some of them in to meet. I can't remember what that group is called that the department that the Minister for Agriculture chairs, but it's a national grouping, and Minister for Agriculture brought all of the national leads in to meet some of our business community from Catechin and Catalyst and others who are working on environmentally sustainable contributory projects, but also very important businesses. So we're doing a lot within the port in terms of our own emissions and sustainability. One of the things we have, you'll see whenever we're going out, we actually have oysters in the port to filter the water. We wouldn't suggest you eat them, actually, but we're trying different things, and we have a sustainability officer who's really innovative, trying different things to ensure we clean the water as much as we can, and that we are as sustainable as we can be. One of the other projects, when we're talking about funding, if we were to get shared island funding, we're looking at potentially investing in shore power, and that would be a huge investment, so that vessels coming into the port would plug in to the electricity system. It's hugely costly, it's hugely ambitious project, but it would be a much cleaner way of them remaining operational while they're in the port. So that's another thing we're looking at. I'm going to bring in Joe and Morris. I'm sure they'll talk about sustainability and the answer to your other question.
Yeah, just a couple of quick metrics for you. It's an area, as you've heard from Joe, we're really active in. We have an ambition to be the first net zero port. in the UK and Ireland for our own direct emissions. That's, if you know the subject, it's the so-called Scope 1 and Scope 2. Emissions, we're well on track to achieve that before 2030. Our emissions from our direct operations last year were about 1,100 tonnes equivalent, which is a very low sum. In the sector, you benchmark against what your figures were in 2015, and we've achieved a reduction of over 80%. And just last year was about 30% reduction. So well on course to reduce that further, residual 1,100 tonnes equivalent. The other area where we're particularly active is for each one of our development projects, whether it's a gardens or whether it's an office product or logistics or studios, we aim to deliver the highest sustainability credentials that are available and measured in the marketplace. That's that so-called BREEAM Excellent standard. First time we're the only party that's delivered BREEAM Excellent movie studios. We're the first to develop BREEAM Excellent logistics warehousing on the island of Ireland, etc. So we challenge ourselves for every development project is what's the highest baseline of sustainability that we can incorporate into our development.
So there was another question. Sorry, do you want to come through?
Sorry, if I may, thank you through the chair. Just it's a bit light touch, but it's a really good example of just how ahead of the game we are in this. So we've got Springwatch filming here at the moment, despite the construction work going on and despite the operational activity of the port, because they're looking at our blossoming kingfisher population and the really stable and growing seal population. So, you know, from the biodiversity point of view, Springwatch are considering us an example of what's really good about Northern Ireland. So. And that'll be broadcasting.
So the second part of your question, I think, was around how we impact jobs. Was it apprenticeships or through our contracts?
How the port assists Northern Ireland, you know, with the turbines and meeting sort of just general net zero, but then also how that is there a trickle down effect, you know, to other maritime areas, if you will, as well, to ensure that, you know, these things get out offshore.
Yeah. We're working within the Department for Economy Energy Strategy. So, you know, it's very important that we contribute as other bodies are doing, but not in the way that we obviously, the offshore wind turbine is a unique product for us in Belfast. In terms of employment, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, employment and just, you know, where, you know, does it, because there's obviously...
Yes.
Granted, we're talking about Belfast Port here, if that makes sense, but there are does it transfer across to some of the other collaborative ports we have? I know you can't answer for that, but
yeah.
I'm just curious.
Well, I'd say that in terms of wind turbines, not at the moment, apart from the project we've already mentioned with Cork Port and the sharing that will go on there through Shared Island, but not in terms of wind turbines. But that's not to say that won't happen in the future. I mean, as I said, this opportunity for reclassification feeds into the ambition of all the trust ports and what they want to do going forward. And I suppose in terms of size, Foyle Port would be the next biggest, and you know, they may well have ambitions. I know they certainly have ambitions in terms of energy and feeding into the energy transition in a major way. But what they would use their funding for, I can't answer. They'd have to answer that themselves. But we are part of NEMO, which is the other thing to mention, which is Northern Ireland Marine and Offshore, which is a body that's been set up by Invest NI. And we would feed into, there is a network of businesses looking at opportunities, because there's so many different opportunities within the energy transition. We mentioned warehousing, mentioned turbines, but there are many other things. There's the operation and maintenance that will go on for the wind farms as they're constructed. There's storage facilities. So there are many, and many other parts of that industry which we're a part of, and we feed in through this network that, as I say, has been established by Invest NI.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. That's very interesting. And but moving on, sort of to the sort of trust support classification. You meant sort of going just through sort of what's been said. You know, independent but implement program for government policies. You know, not private but not public. And then I was reading through the reports, and you mentioned part of direct in relation to the harbour masters, if you will, and I get that. But there's also the part of direct in relation to from the government, if you get the meaning. I'm just wondering how that's, so I get the thing from the finance point of view of an accountant, but I'm just wondering how the oversight still sits in relation to this reclassification, and given all that you said about not private, not public.
Well,
trying to marry all the things up. So
I know, and it is complex. But I suppose the important point is the minister will still appoint the chair, and I think a deputy chair is mentioned, and there are 4 councillors who sit on the Harbour Commission board. So the level of scrutiny and accountability, I don't think it'll change. I mean, when I look at the relationship I have, I mean, I'm appointed by the minister, and I'm appraised by the department. So if there were any issues arising within this body that the department, the minister and the department were not content with, there's a mechanism there already for them to to both issue their concern and control if necessary. So I don't think personally that is a diminution. The rest, it is a balance, and I think this is one of the points that you look at when you're looking at scrutinising the legislation. To get the ONS reclassification, there has to be a balance between the level of control exercised by government and independence, and that balance is the critical piece in terms of reclassification, because ONS will make their determination, and it's that balance, getting that balance right, and that's where the legislation is saying that basically the board would recruit the board members, albeit with those appointments that I've mentioned already made by the minister, but that would be done on the basis of any recruitment, and there would also be involvement of the Public Appointments Commission. So it wouldn't be just cast adrift, but there is a balance to be achieved, and that's going to be a challenging, I think, balance which departmental officials and yourselves you will look at through the scrutiny process for the legislation, but also following the legislation when ONS becomes involved, trying to ensure that the balance is such that they will reclassify the body, and that's a difficult one.
Okay. Thank you. We're coming to the end now. You'll be glad to hear of questions, but I just wanted to ask in relation to the proposed legislative change, do you think it goes far enough in your view? I know we don't have the piece of legislation sitting in front of us right now, but do you think it will go far enough, or do you think that there's any opportunity to go further, which may align obviously with your future aspirations or goals as well?
Well, I'm not aware of it, because I think they've tried to keep the process as aligned as possible to the 2009 process, which would have enabled it then to meet the legislative timetable. I mean, I don't need to tell people around this table, drafting legislation is not an easy thing, and to start from scratch would have been much more difficult than the process, which is already challenging. I mean, we've talked about it around at this committee meeting. So to start from a zero base would have been probably impossible to get it through this legislative mandate. So there's certainly, from my perspective, nothing's been drawn to my attention that we would like that, if only. So Joe, I don't know if you want to...
There's nothing in the consultation as presented, which we believe is a constraint or didn't go far enough. So we're very happy with the consultation. I guess the ultimate final piece with the legislation and making sure there's nothing in the drafting of the legislation that maybe inadvertently puts a constraint on us. So we'll await the legislation, but from the stages of the process so far, on a consultative basis, we're very happy that our full ambition is recognised and reflected in what the proposed changes are.
No, and like, I appreciate that, because obviously we'll be doing the same. We'll be looking at the legislation, we'll be scrutinising it, we'll be checking that there's no unintended consequences, all of that, and that's what our aim is as a committee. We're a scrutiny body, and that's what we're here to do. And yes, that will take time, and there will be a process that will have to go forward, but let's hope we'll be in a position by the end of this mandate where we can maybe come back again with some with legislation that's then in place. So I know that there is an awful lot of work that is going on in relation to it. So But look, we appreciate your time and for giving us evidence today, which is really, really useful. And no doubt when the legislation actually comes, there'll be further discussions with yourselves and perhaps other trust boards as well, and ports across Northern Ireland in relation to it. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
And thank you, Chair, and to all the committee members for all your support. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Members, if you're... I just want to check in, first of all, I do want to go to a comfort break for 5 minutes, but I want to check, is there anything that members want to bring up?
The only thing, Chair, I would ask is we know how long this is in the pipeline through a variety of mandates, and my one concern is that it doesn't get held up in the legislative agenda. This seems to me, I'm not preempting what the legislation looks like or the scrutiny process, but a quick win. Yeah. And if there are triage in legislation that's going through the Assembly, let's get ones done that can make a positive impact and could be done quickly. Yeah. And that's all I would say. Yeah. And it would be lamentable if we ended up in the next mandate and this wasn't in place, given how far we've come.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we can influence that.
That's what I said in my remarks. I mean, this has been going on a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's a copy and paste from other areas, but there should be a lot of work done. And the sooner we can look at it.
Yeah. Well, in my view, at this moment in time, it seems straightforward, which I suppose is why there is frustration that we don't have it just at this moment in time. Perhaps, Deputy Chair, if you want the committee to just check in again with the department, just on their timescales.
We know that the majority of it, I assume, has been drafted over 15 years ago.
Yeah. Well, the public consultation and everything, so it's just if we can get a definitive time scale in relation to when we will have it.
That would be nice.
That would be good. Yeah. Are you content with that? Yeah? Okay, well, look, members, I'm just going to take a 5-minute break. So over 5 minutes, if we come back here at 11:30, is that okay?
You want to do a picture as well some stage?
Yeah, with Stephen. Okay, so our next agenda item is public sector transformation funding, and it's Department for Infrastructure Oral Evidence. So at page 241, you'll see the Clerk's Memo, Public Sector Transformation Funding. At pages 244, you'll see the correspondence from the Department on Public Sector Transformation Funding. So we are welcoming to the committee today Mr. Alistair Beggs, Director for the Transformation Planning Bid, Simon Richardson, Director of Sustainable Drainage, and Stuart Whiteman, Programme Manager, Sustainable Drainage Directorate. You're very welcome to the committee today, and we appreciate your time because transformation is really important. And we all see things move forward, particularly in some of the areas where money has been allocated to. So I'm just seeking agreement that the evidence is recorded by Hansard. All agreed? Agreed. Okay. So if you don't mind, we do obviously have some information, but if you wouldn't mind just briefly outlining it for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to come to members' questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Members of committee, again, thank you for inviting us along to discuss the Department's 2 public sector transformation projects. As you'll be aware from the briefing, all this stems from part of the financial package to restore the executive. And as part of that, UK government committed to provide 235 million in ring-fenced funding for the purpose of transformation in May 2024. The executive, after that, established an interim public transformation board, and a first call for transformation proposals was issued to departments on the 31st of May 2024. Now, in March 2025, we were obviously delighted that the department had been successful in securing funding for 2 of its transformation proposals, the transforming planning bid in relation to independent inspectors and transforming urban drainage through nature-based solutions. So I'll give a very brief overview of the planning project before I hand over to Simon to cover the urban drainage project. In terms of the planning transformation project, the briefing pretty much sets out the current situation that we have at the moment, but I would just like to draw out a couple of brief points. And The project has really arisen out of the concerns that the department and other stakeholders throughout the planning system had in relation to resource issues in the Planning Appeals Commission, which were causing delays in the progress of important public local inquiries and hearings, and the potential delays in future independent examinations of council local development plans. This was something that was affecting confidence in the planning system as a whole, both amongst the public and investors in the country. So within the lifetime of the project, this funding is going to really allow us to use for the first time our powers to appoint independent inspectors to undertake work with the aim of providing an alternative route to progress what we call hear and report work immediately. And it's to restore faith in this particular part of the planning system by speeding the processes up in relation to hear and report work. So improve certainty, improve clarity, and it's going to reduce the inherent waste that comes with delay as things sit unprogressed. So it also, we would hope that by taking this work on, that will allow the Planning Appeals Commission to concentrate on its own appeal work, what we term here and decide work, and so that will hopefully facilitate them looking at how to improve figures in relation to that critical part of the planning system as well. And as part of the project, we also really want to look at the use of AI where we possibly can, and the use of technology to promote engagement with the planning process and to speed up delivery. It's very important we get buy-in to this particular project. So really at the moment we've just set up the core team to take things forward. Things are now really starting to speed up as we're brainstorming everything, putting things together. So we're looking at preparing the detailed project plans at the moment and getting all the business cases ready for that. But really within the next 6 to 9 months, we'll be looking at getting all the governance and processes in place to allow independent inspectors to start work. I'd just like to finish there and maybe pass over to Simon.
Thanks, Alistair. Thank you very much. My name is Simon Richardson. I'm the Director of Sustainable Drainage, and Stuart White, my colleague, is with me today. I'd just like to give you a short introduction to the pilot project on the urban drainage, and then we'll obviously take some questions. The committee will have received numerous briefings on the pressure on our sewage networks and our wastewater treatment works and the significant levels of investments that are needed. The Living with Water in Belfast plan identified over £1.9 billion of infrastructure that is needed in the Greater Belfast area alone. However, the Belfast plan also identified the need to complement hard engineered upgrades with softer nature-based solutions. So traditionally, rainwater in towns and cities is carried away by underground pipes to nearby rivers, but actually in the vast majority of cases it's transferred to combined sewers, where it's mixed with sewage, resulting in this having to be pumped and chemically treated at wastewater treatment works. During periods of intense rain, these pipes become overwhelmed and discharged via overflows into rivers, causing environmental damage, which you'll all hear about as well. And when the capacity of these sewers is exceeded, it can also be a source of flooding to roads and houses and businesses. So slowing and reducing the flow of rainwater into the drainage system will help to reduce flood risk, improve water quality by reducing spills from combined sewers, and hopefully provide a cost saving to NI Water through reduced energy costs and for pumping and treatment. So this urban drainage project proposal is to develop and deliver a £15 million pilot project over the next 4 years to store and slow the flow of rainwater through urban areas using nature-based solutions. The proposal is based on the UK's largest sustainable drainage scheme, which is Mansfield, where Severn Trent Water, the water company for the area, is investing £76 million to deliver over 30,000 cubic metres of rainwater storage. We've provided you with some pictures there from Mansfield and also from Sheffield, where we visited recently, where nature-based drainage features such as rain gardens, swales and detention basins have been successfully retrofitted into the urban environment. So in a similar way in Mansfield, we propose to retrofit around 10,000 cubic metres of rainwater storage through a range of these nature-based drainage solutions. NI Water will be our lead delivery partner, and will be supported by DFI Rivers and DFI Roads. And when we have identified where the potential interventions will be located, we will liaise with the relevant council and landowners to develop the most appropriate nature-based solutions for the location and the surrounding area. So, as I said, the aim is to demonstrate the benefit of managing rainwater naturally on the surface, to reduce and slow its flow into rivers and pipe drainage systems. And nature-based solutions can also have the potential to help our towns and cities to adapt to the increased rainfall, flooding and heat waves that are likely to experience as part of climate change. The lessons learned from this pilot project will help inform the rollout of a wider sustainable drainage and natural flood management projects. And just to finish up, the focus of my team over the next 6 to 9 months will be to formally establish this pilot project, identify potential schemes and secure the necessary approvals and commence delivery in early 2026. And then we will set out a programme of work over the next 3 years to help demonstrate the benefits of managing rainwater more naturally on the surface. So that's a quick intro, and Chair, obviously happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much. And Alistair, we know from being Chief Planner, you know exactly, and I know that you've moved on from that role, so thank you for your work during that time. And obviously now you're in this role, and have some vested interests, I suppose, from coming from the Chief Planning end. I suppose the key is the key milestones and the achievements, and how will that actually be measured and ensure that we have that accountability there, that the money that we have received will actually make the difference in terms of transformation?
Yeah. No, it's a very good question, Chair. I think we're looking at that in a number of ways. Part of that is we're going to be having independent experts take part in the project to help us establish it. Now, those are people who, I can say one is the chief reporter in Scotland has said he's willing to help us there. So we get his knowledge and experience because they're doing a number of interesting things. And we also have the chief executive of the Office of the Planning Regulator down south, who's also agreed to be a critical friend to us in that regard to take it forward. So we'll have those them questioning us at all stages and contributing to what we're taking forward. I think we're also going to be, obviously answerable to the interim public transformation board in itself. So we'll be engaging with them, and we've had discussions already on key performance indicators to help us with that project, so that we get that established at the end. The project itself lends itself to quite high-level indicators. But what we see as really critical is getting the correct protocols and the guidance in place to make sure that when the inspectors start work, we have to get quality independent reports, or this is not going to work at all. We think we can do that. So that's what we are going to be upfronting with. And with the detailed project plan in place, we're now starting to get a very good handle on what we need to do and what succession to do that. And that's why I think we're really going to spend those next 6 to 9 months getting that absolutely right and proof before we go out. And I hope I've answered the question, but if there's anything that I want.
If you don't mind, just on the key indicators will be important even for this committee to scrutinise and to make sure that we have actually spent the money effectively. So will that be publicly available in terms of those key indicators that we can measure the success? I'm hoping for success, not failure. I'm sure you are as well. So will those be public, that those will be measured, and we have the resource to do that even?
Yeah. I would certainly very much like to have these publicly available. I think as much should be publicly available as possible so people have confidence in what we're doing here. So those are there. I say they could be quite high, like saying when we press the trigger to set off a public inquiry, we do a set number of months. That's our target, is to get that up and running within a number of months and set targets for the reporters coming back to us as well. But I think the really important indicator will be is if when this work comes and is ready to be moved on, that it moves into that system immediately, because I think that's the problem that we faced in the past, Chair, but I agree.
Sorry, Simon.
Same question to me.
Yeah.
In relation to the drainage project, I give you a figure there of 10,000 cubic metres that we want to provide that quantity of storage through a series of interventions. We also want to break that down into the different types of interventions, and that you'll see that in some of the photographs. So some of the larger scale projects, the detention basins, provide an opportunity to get those volumes. And if the more volume we can actually store and infiltrate. So in some circumstances, we can store the water and we'll have to return to the sewerage system in a slower pace. But if we can store it in the right location and depending on ground conditions, that might infiltrate into the ground and it doesn't go back into the system. So we need to test and monitor the different range of interventions that we have to show what gives us the best value and what gives us the best outcome. So not only will there be a high-level target share of the 10,000 cubic metres, we will also be looking at the different interventions, see what the main benefits of those range of interventions are, have a lessons learned document from that, and we can feed that through to our delivery partners, as I say, roads, rivers, NI Water, where these interventions should be used and where we get best value for the different types of interventions. So there's a high level 10,000 cubic metres, but we also have to learn about the different range that we have available to us and what works well in Belfast.
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to diminish the fact that you've received money and it is very welcome. There's no doubt about it. I suppose looking at in relation to the urban drainage side of things, we will have the water flooding and sustainable drainage bill that will be coming up to the committee. How much of the work that you're doing will feed into that particular piece of legislation? And are we, two parts of this question, are we funding something that will be easy, I suppose, for the department to fund because it will help in relation to this piece of legislation? Do you know what I'm trying to say there?
Yeah. Well, in relation to that legislation will give us the powers to develop policy for sustainable drainage in private developments. So this pilot project that we're talking about is retrofitting the existing infrastructure that's there. So it's looking at situations where pipes could be overwhelmed and where we have green space available. We can intercept those pipes, take it to a detention pond, infiltrate that, and either reduce and bring it back in at a slower pace. So that's where the pilot project will focus on. We will focus on probably working in locations which are owned by either ourselves, our councils, or housing executive partners that we've worked with before. So that legislation you talk about, that will allow us, as part of the overall way that we will manage urban drainage, there's no real point in retrofitting existing systems if we allow new systems just to continue to be built in the old way. So that legislation actually will be very beneficial to us and my team whenever we go to look at how we develop a policy for sustainable drainage through new developments, to allow that to be designed properly, designed using nature-based solutions rather than grey concrete pipes and tanks, and allow that to be approved through the planning system so that those systems that are proposed by developers will work and that we are all satisfied that they take forward the best practice. This pilot scheme, by actually moving quickly at pace and delivering some of these interventions on the ground, I think will help developers come and look at what we're doing, and the findings that we get from this pilot will actually feed into the development of future policy and the way we shape new developments going forward. So I think this pilot is really helpful in getting interventions on the ground, so we don't have to go to Mansfield to look at them. We can look at them in Belfast and we can see what benefit they make in Belfast.
So can I just ask in relation to, obviously I know it's urban drainage, that is the key for this particular project, but the rationale, I suppose, for choosing the two catchment areas in Belfast of Fort William and Whitehouse, why those two areas were picked,
Yes.
Could it have been outside of Belfast? I mean, with urban centres outside Belfast as well.
Yes. What we did when we were considering this pilot, I think the main beneficiary of this pilot will be NI Water, because if we reduce or slow the flow of water into the combined sewers, then there are less spills and there's less treatment at wastewater treatment works. So the beneficiary of this is NI Water. So we've been working with them to develop this pilot. But in doing so, we also said that we may as well pick a catchment that NI Water are working in, where they have problems in, and that this will actually try and address some of their problems as well. So White House and Fort William were two catchments that we had worked on through the Living with Water programme. We had identified some of the problems that NI Water are having there and are still having, and we want to see if this pilot can actually assist them in what they're doing in their work. So we felt it was a better collaboration between ourselves and NI Water to allow us, we may as well work in an area they're having difficulties in to see if that will assist with their problems. So that's really why we picked there.
Okay, I'm not going to take up too much more time. Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, gentlemen, for coming along today and for your answers so far. And the Chair's covered some of those top level discussions. Just in terms of those two areas, so I'm assuming there were other areas you looked at, and that had it not been for these two picked, there were probably a wealth of others that could have been picked. And to that end, if the pilot was successful, are there a pile of others of low-hanging fruit potentially that could well be proceeded with if that was the case?
Yes, I mean, we could have looked at lots of places.
Okay.
And what I would say, and we've said, although we're concentrating and focusing on those two catchments because we want to work collaboratively with NI Water.
Yeah.
Through some of the other work that we have done, if we do find low-hanging fruit and an opportunity becomes available that we can easily do something outside of those catchments, we will look at that.
Okay.
Because it's again, building it and demonstrating it and being able to monitor it may well help us deliver. So we're not excluding the fact that we may move elsewhere, but for the focus of the pilot initially, we're looking at White House and Fort William.
Okay.
It's worth maybe just explaining as well, with White House there's some quite unique issues there. You've got a shellfish bed in the lock in the close vicinity of the outfall from the treatment works.
Yes.
You've got a treatment works that's overwhelmed, and then you've got issues with the sewage network, quite a steep. And you've probably seen the Spotlight programme, there's issues, too much water getting into the system and coming out of the system.
Yeah.
And then you go up into the hills, you've opportunities to do stuff up in the hills and actually hold the water back. So you have a nice opportunity because there's a number of issues, and it really came out top in terms of the priority for that reason.
In terms of getting bang for the buck, I suppose, in that respect. The Chair touched on this, maybe I just wasn't able to understand it, so I'll try my question. Has anyone been able to formalise, quantify, write down in terms of how you calculate the invest to save model between doing schemes like this and taking away the cost burden to NI Water in terms of processing that rainwater? I.e., we spend $100,000 here, taking rainwater out of the system by putting in lovely flower beds. I'm not being facetious, but, for example, and that saves down the line over 5 years X amount in electricity through these pumping stations. Has anyone been able to do that, or is this about testing that over a period of time?
It's about testing that over a period. And Mansfield was the prime example. It was a no regrets approach.
Right.
They didn't go in and monitor it to death or calculate, analyse it to death at the start. They knew through engineering judgment, if you go and you intercept a pipe and you take it off, and it doesn't get into the system. Mansfield were probably in a better position because their ground conditions where a lot of this is infiltrated into the ground. It never goes back into the combined sewer network. So that's obviously the best situation. But what they decided was, look, let's go and build it. We know it's going to benefit, and then we will monitor it when it's in place.
Yes.
So I think a lot of the work for us within this pilot scheme will be identifying what we feel are the correct areas.
Yeah.
Go and put them in, and then monitor what that does and what the benefits are going forward. So, in answer to your question, we will hope that those benefits we will be able to summarise at the end of the pilot. But we're not trying to analyse it to death at the start to make sure we pick the exact right spot, because that we could spend 4 years doing that, and we get, it's very frustrating over-analysing.
Yes.
We know if we, through engineering judgment, if we pick the right place, we can make a benefit.
Yeah.
And that's the approach. It's a no regrets approach, but obviously learning lessons from what we do.
I won't lie, gents, I saw the photographs of Mansfield, they look amazing, and I'm sure this isn't a direct overlap between the scheme you're going to, and I thought, my goodness, my inbox would go nuts after a year of the rainwater going through those, because no one will be able to cut them, given the pressures on the burden, unable to cut grass right now.
Put right shrubbery and don't worry
I
about
don't want to open that can of worms, because they look fantastic, so maybe the key to that is community engagement, getting buy-in from councils, for everyone to ensure we don't have 6 foot high flower beds that are totally under control.
Without skipping over that,
it is an important issue.
It absolutely is, and that's why I'm going to address. Maintenance of this is is an issue.
Yes.
And if you're asking me the question, who's going to maintain all of these?
Yes.
I probably don't have that answer for you.
Because it is a key question.
Because it is, but it depends where the intervention was. If it was on council land, we may consider sitting down with council from a grass cutting point of view. NI Water might have to take the outlet pipe. Again, if we got all the players in a room and we started to thrash that through, it would be a long, hard conversation, and it has been because I've tried to do it. But when we go and we identify these, and that's again this no regrets approach, but we know this is the right thing to do. Let's go and build it. Let's demonstrate what the benefits are, and then let's sit down sensibly and decide who's best placed to maintain it. If we, some of those detention ponds, which are just grassed, are minimal maintenance, and they provide the best bang for your buck, if you like, because they're the bigger quantities. Some of the smaller rain garden type things, yes, would need more maintenance. Although, having been to Mansfield and Sheffield, they feel that one intervention per year, if it's done properly, the maintenance can be controlled once a year. So, again, we're learning from that.
Well, Simon, there's the key, done properly. Because I look at the grass verges and the sight lines in Carrickfergus, and it looks like my 8-year-old did with his Fisher-Price lawnmower, and that's the problem. We need to make sure it's being done properly, and there's a budget for it, and that there's an agreement. And I know you get that. It's just whether others get that, and whether we can have to buy in with council, NI Water, and everybody to ensure it's done properly. That would be my big concern. But it doesn't mean I'm against it. I think it's a great idea. Just ducks in mind.
Yeah, no. Before I move on, that it is. We can laugh, but it is a serious point, and the fact that I know at this moment in time, like you have said, you've had to have the key players in the room, and that's difficult, and that's something that we need to maybe take on board as a committee as well, in terms of that moving forward, because otherwise, I don't want to say wasted money, but in a way, it's that hereafter. You want the project to work. It's a hereafter.
Absolutely, yeah.
Andrew, sorry.
No, thank you, Chair. And as Mr. Stewart gets the emails to cut the grass, and then when the grass gets cut, I get the emails saying, "Why'd you cut the grass for?" So,
I'm asking for the sight lines, Andrew. Health, safety first. We always said safety first in this committee.
Environmentalists in the room, but
safety first.
No, it's good to see this. I suppose the main point really is to come back to is when pilots become standard, and I suppose what I mean by that is it's great to see these ones going ahead, but Newcastle and Downpatrick both had flooding of which surface water drainage was attributed. So while it's great to see this, there's a certain amount of it's a pity it wasn't there'd been a desire to see it in our area, if that makes sense. So next best thing is when do you envisage this becoming more of a standard, and what sort of retrofits will be available in areas that have had attributed flooding to surface drainage?
I think we would have to accept that this is the first step in a long process. We've had to go to Mansfield to look at these type of interventions because there aren't any here. So really, there are a few along the Consultation Greenway, but this is why the pilot is so important, to actually demonstrate that when we do have an intervention at a certain location, it will make a difference at that location. I'm not going to oversell this in relation to the huge event that happened, in Downpatrick and Uri, whether this type of intervention would have any benefit in that circumstance. I'm not trying to do that. What we're trying to do here is change the way we and other infrastructure providers look at surface water. Do we always go to getting it off the surface as quickly as possible, putting it into a concrete pipe and getting it away? Because the only place to get it away to is either to a river, which is not always possible, or it goes to a wastewater treatment works. So it's trying to change how we place manage our urban environments. So we try and get the water just not to go into pipes, or less of it goes into a pipe, and that it infiltrates. So this is a first step in a very long process, I would say. And again, referring back to the issue about new developments, we don't want to go and retrofit. In 20 years' time, we don't want to be having to retrofit new developments that are being built now. We want them to consider the whole rainwater process, where it falls, dealing with it at source. Don't have a first attempt to put it into a pipe, try and deal with it through natural solutions. So in answer to your question, when's it going to come to Newry or Downpatrick? I mean, through this pilot, it won't probably. If something became available that was, as I said earlier, was an exception that we could really low-hanging fruit and go and demonstrate something, I'd certainly look at it. But this is about changing approach to the other way of solving this is to go and dig up all the roads and put bigger pipes in. Nobody wants to do that both from a engineering point of view, from a traffic congestion point of view, all of those things. So this is a first step in trying to change attitudes to how we deal with rainwater. And the fact that somewhere floods and we know it's going to flood and we design that place floods isn't a bad thing, because it means that a house isn't flooded or sewage doesn't come out of the network. So sorry, I'm trying to bring some reality to what we're trying to do. This is a first step in trying to change our approach to how we deal with surface water. And it will be a long
Worth
process.
saying as well that Simon mentioned the £1.9 billion needed for the infrastructure, the hard infrastructure in Belfast. That's still needed. This is alongside that, so let's not kid ourselves. It's not the silver bullet. It's not going to solve all your. It's about a change of approach. And one of the challenges Northern Ireland Water has is that the traditional approach is you have a spill come out of the sewer, or you have a out of sewer flooding incident. The traditional approach is to put a big concrete tank in the ground, which costs millions. That's dealing with the symptoms of the problem. The problem is there's too much water getting into the system. But because that's the tried and tested method, this pilot will hopefully help demonstrate to Northern Ireland Water and their regulators that there's other ways of doing this, because there's over 200 non-compliant spill or CSOs in Belfast alone. So as Simon said, it's just the start of a process.
No, thank you. And to say that's me, Chair. I think that's
super. Thank you, Cahill.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. You're welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All I can say is good luck with the plan and stuff, and keep us posted. Okay. My experience of plan, but just we're it's welcome.
Okay.
So it's a first start for us. We have to move somewhere with it.
Indeed.
So good luck on that, and obviously we'll keep posted. Same interesting subject, to be fair. And I mean, I think there's a good idea and a good thing, because you have an issue where no matter how we try and manage, where storm drains or sewage or both or a mixture of both, we have serious challenges. And I welcome the new legislation going forward that anything that's been built should be built and catered for, where it's to deal with stormwater and so on. But we have a problem with what you're trying to deal with now. Is we have an issue of we're going to look at these things for the next 20 years and try and deal with them. And there's more and more flooding. So I think this is a fairly reasonable challenge for us, but it's a fairly reasonable thing to do. I was looking at the picture, and I take John's point about cutting grass and all that there, but I mean, you're talking about surface water here, and we've seen the damages done this last wee while. So I think it's a good thing. My main question is, clearly all the evidence up to now is out there. You work with NAW, you know where the flooding spots is, because we've done a flooding map and all of those things. And really the stuff that they're doing now, and you pick this out for this pilot, roughly have you an idea how many of these, besides Belfast, right across the north, where this type of solution may be needed? Or is that, you're just trying this out as a pilot? Or?
This has just been tried out as a pilot, and we're trying to maximise what we can do with the money available to us. We're looking at other sources, shared all-Ireland funding, to see if we can get more money through that way. We within the department will look within the budget that's available to me if something else, if we can add to this. But I think the potential right across all areas is, we haven't quantified that at all. And that's what we can do within the pilot project. Some of the things that we're expecting to find in the pilot project when we go to put a swale or a detention basin in a certain area of services, ground conditions, all of those things that are barriers to what we want to do. So it's learning from that and seeing if services, the need to move services could just scupper an intervention. So we could get into an intervention and quickly find this isn't viable and we move somewhere else. And I actually think this will be what happens in this pilot. We will go and do a desktop study and say there's green spaces here, here, and here. And when we get into it, some of them will be able to go green. Others we will not be able to do that because there are some other intervention or some other barriers that would stop us going. So to expand that out right across all areas, we haven't done that at this point.
No, 100%, because I'm just thinking, because we're reactionary here, because we establish what the issue is in those two areas, and it's going to be the same. But you're right, it's never going to be a one size fits all, because the flooding issue over in the area and thing is a different. You're right across. But my main point is, we're gathering the evidence now to try and come up with some solutions. And the more we do, and the more we learn. I think it's a good idea looking at this here, and that's what we should be. But it'll learn us now when we go to do this piece of legislation that any new builds or anything, these things should be in place right across the board. On the side, but they should be across the board, because I'm up here a number of years and it seems to be getting worse all the time. There's nothing we can do with stuff that's already built, and we have to react. The flooding situation or surface water. That one coming off the mountain, I mean, you've surface water plus water coming off the mountain as well. So, but the last couple of years has been the sewage on the streets and everything else, which created a major problem. So it's good. It'll be interesting to see. But you see, in terms of any feedback from the Mansfield one, has there been any feedback?
Yes, there has. The main feedback is some of the smaller interventions provide lesser benefit. It's the bigger detention basins and the swales that provide you with the greatest benefit and are actually easier to build, easier to maintain. And again, so I think we've learned something from Mansfield to say that in the early stages we're going to concentrate on the low-hanging fruit and the bigger interventions on green spaces, because that's where the benefit is. The rain gardens, as we call them, on the side of the roads, have smaller benefit, but there may well be locations where it will be a better solution. But it will not give us our 10,000 cubic metres. It's the bigger interventions that will give us our 10,000 cubic metres. So I think from Mansfield we've learnt our first port of call, if you like, we're going to look for those bigger interventions off road and green spaces that are adjacent to housing developments and roads.
Okay, just we add on.
Very quick.
See in terms of what we have. Like if you go to America, you have manholes that are into the curbs. I mean, the runoff is into the curb. I mean, we have a lot of manhole covers here. I mean, no matter what street you dive down, because once it's fit in the middle of the road, then there's no choice, because that's where the system runs. As long as that. Are we looking at that in the future to try and, as we do new stuff, that's where you should put it, because that seems a logical way to run.
If you look at there's some of the examples there in Mansfield. There's drainage curbs that feed some of the features.
Yeah.
So although when you look at, you don't appreciate it, when you look at there's one of a rain garden outside a shop. It's actually quite deep. It's actually about 3 or 4 feet deep, about a metre deep, and then there's actually material, clean stone goes in, so it's about another metre. So it has to be quite deep because it actually catches the. So they are, that is certainly, and even in new development, it's all about dealing with stuff at source, rainwater at source. So, ideally, you don't need gullies.
No,
you don't need, and in Sheffield, there's no gullies in some of the places because the water runs straight off the road and into the rain garden. So, that's the idea about dealing with it at source is where we want to get to.
Super, thank you,
Thank
Keith.
you.
Okay, thanks, gentlemen, for coming along. I have a couple of questions. Wind the clock back. When did we here in Northern Ireland split the combined systems in housing estates or developments that we went from storm to combined to split? How long ago are we talking roughly?
70s.
The 70s. Mm-hmm. So anything from the 70s, you have a storm outlet and a foul outlet. Mm-hmm. Okay. So see today then. So if I go to build 100 houses on my storm connection, have I to put an attenuation into that, or have I to hold that water at the minute from a planning point of view? When did that come in?
Yes, it depends if you're connected, and if there's a water course or river nearby, you would apply through the drainage order to our Rivers College to get a Schedule 6, and that's about Greenfield runoff, and you would have to provide some sort of attenuation. If you're going into the sewer, it tends to be that when you come to the curtilage of the development, you'll probably find it's a combined sewer. There's no water pipe, so you will have a lot of these separated developments that are going into the combined system, and that's what we're focusing on.
And then the way out you join theoretically, because there's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Sorry, I was just going to say, no, I'm not going to speak. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Because you're exactly picking up on the point that we're looking at those sites in the 1970s that are already separated, have a separate system,
but join at the boundary.
And then join at the boundary. And if we can pick that up at the right point and take that away to a detention basin, and some of that water will infiltrate, some of the times we have to bring it back in again, but we can bring it back at a slow rate. So sorry, I jumped in there.
No, you're okay.
That, but exactly.
I have a few alibi points. You see this example over in Mansfield? They spent 76 million for 30,000 cube. You're going to spend a fifth of that to get a third of it.
Yeah.
How are you doing that?
Well, you're going to pick up on that too. Their initial indication, whenever we first made our bid, they were going to spend 76 million, but they were going to attenuate nearly 50,000. So we made our estimations based on that. Why they didn't deliver what they thought they were going to deliver was because permeable paving was one of the features that they were going to look at, and they found that to be overly expensive and didn't provide what they needed. They found that out quite early. So they actually changed from 50,000 down to 30,000 quite recently over the last 6 months. We were quite ambitious with our 10,000. So in answer to your question, I'm hoping that we will be able to find some of the larger scale interventions, and that will get our 10,000 cubic metres up, or come close to our 10,000 cubic metres. But you're right, I can't lose sight of the fact that we need to deliver all of these range of interventions so we can, because it's a pilot scheme, we need to learn from it.
So are you planning to do a little bit of everything?
Yes.
To learn from it?
Yes.
And not necessarily that it's the best, and I don't mean that rude, I have no issue a little, but if you do a metre square in a town and you have a 25 mil rain event, you need 40 of them to be 1 metre.
Correct.
But this is going to do a few of these to learn from. Well, that's a good idea. It's not a good idea.
Yeah.
But if you were doing it based on your money, Simon, you would just build one of those basins.
If I'm going to be
you don't fall into the reservoir act, don't go to
no, exactly.
Don't go above 10,000.
You need a manager and everything else like that.
You're exactly. I don't want to be not blinded by the 10,000. The 10,000 cubic meters is a objective that I put forward, and I'll try and attain that. But I don't want to lose sight. I need to test the range of interventions and see where they benefit.
And this is the range.
Those are the range of the features that are available. But you're right. You're right to pick up on that. 76 million down to 30,000 cube, 15 million down to 10,000. But I say we're going to try and see if we can get funding from the Shared Island funding, and also through ourselves, through the department, if we feel we can add some additional funding to it.
One quick question, Alistair, for you. What happens whenever the 3 million runs out?
At that point, what we really hope to have is that we have all the processes in place that they can be re-engaged if and when required. And I think towards the end of the project, what we want to build into it is to say do we keep it going? And if so, what funding, where can we obtain funding for that from? I think that's to be considered, but that is a very important question. But basically, we will have everything in place already to be able to kickstart the project off or to facilitate taking this work forward again. So I suppose this project has two phases. The initial phase is getting absolutely everything in place, ready to get the inspectors up and running. Then we're going to have some years of the inspectors going. And I think, it's back to the point the Chair made. I think what we need to do is, to make sure it's working, we need to be able to look and see what is the quality of those reports, what people said about it, what was their experience, and that we're constantly refining it. So by the end of the period, we'll hopefully have something that is very robust and we can kick on. And at that point, yes, we're going to have to think.
I have one final question, if I may. So if you were going out onto the street, Alistair, to talk to Mr. Joe Public, and you're going to explain in a paragraph to me what the benefit of this 3 million is and what it's going to do and how you're going to, and you touched on this earlier, how you're going to evaluate it's probably the best word, right? So I just don't get what this is going to do. And maybe I'm just stupid. Explain to me what this 3 million is going to do and how are we going to see a benefit of the planning system. So explain it in layman's or woman's terms.
Yeah, no.
Please.
Only one paragraph.
4 lines.
I'll try.
Just a limerick. Okay.
No. It's basically what we have are major planning applications. There's billions of pounds worth of investment going through the planning system. And what goes through the hearing report system is some of the biggest stuff that we have and its potential to impact upon our environment and also job creation, rates creation, things like that. They've been held up for years because of a resource issue. We need to be able to move that on, because if we don't, then what is acceptable isn't getting on the ground and creating jobs and investment. And if you're a layperson in the street, what I quite often find is the concern is what is the actual impact upon me? People get quite rightly, I think, very involved with the environmental aspects of these developments as well. And if you're sitting for years waiting to find out what the result of a planning application is, that can affect your life and how you go about it, and that's very concerning. So the whole idea is, if we get this in, we're speeding it up, you get the conclusion that you need to, whether that's protection of the environment or whether we're creating jobs for the country and that investment that we need. And if that system's working fast and well, then I think that encourages investor confidence in Northern Ireland. I think that's one of the big messages we've had from all around is people are honestly questioning, is Northern Ireland a place to come and do business in? Because the planning system, they perceive it as slower than other places. And this is one of the areas where we've hold up. This is a very focused intervention on that end of the process.
Okay, thank you for that. 2.5 is okay.
I suppose the way I see it is, Alistair, yours is a resource.
Yeah.
And Simon, yours is capital, really, in terms of where the investment is going in terms of the two remits there. I suppose there is overlap with both of them as well in terms of planning and the drainage as well, particularly when you look at big projects that happen as well. I suppose, Alistair, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you just a few more questions. The committee obviously had the Interim Regional Planning Commission up to the committee. One of the things that sort of came out from that was stakeholder engagement and the importance of that and who they were engaging with. So is that going to be a big part of your remit and work as well, in terms of the people that you're speaking to, the surveyors, construction, renewable, all of that side of things as well? So can you maybe just touch on the stakeholder engagement?
Can indeed, Chair. Thank you. That's a fundamental part of this, because it's a system that needs buy-in to have confidence. Now, what we are focusing on, we're going to have delivery partners. For example, we've approached the Royal Town Planning Institute, who are the biggest professional planning body in the north, and they represent the whole range of private and public sector planners. So they're an important resource to have. They can reach out. So we'll be involving them, and we'll be discussing with them how to engage perhaps appropriately with other stakeholder groups, whether that's renewables or so on. The councils are also a massive stakeholder in all this. They're probably the prime user in relation to hearing report work in terms of local development plans, for example. And again, we have briefed Solus in writing, that's very briefly, and we will be engaging with them. If they want to speak to us on something, we'll certainly be there and advising them where we are. But again, we want to engage well with them. And we are very much aware that we need a communications plan as part of this project, so that we're reaching out to the right people. In terms of the general public, we're going to be engaging with community places who represent the public out there, the general public. We sometimes find it difficult to engage with the planning system because we feel that they have a useful perspective as to how to get people involved in this. I think the more openness and the more engagement we get is quite critical in relation to that. So yes, we do want to go out. We see those as probably core areas which can reach out to other areas as and when we require them, but it's a very important aspect.
So you've rightly touched on the fact that investors are turning away from Northern Ireland. We hear that, we see that. So getting that shift turned around, particularly in planning, is going to be very, very difficult. Are you confident that the resource that you have as part of this 3 million that you're going to, and Keith has touched on this as well, you're confident that the resource that you're going to have as part of that 3 million is going to start that shift? Because an awful lot of things that have come up in the committee as well is we've had review after review after review on planning. And I think, to be honest, people are sick, sore and tired of reviews in planning. They now just want a bit of action on it. So can you confidently say that by the end of this process that the difference will definitely be there?
Yeah, I believe that we should have shifted the dial, Chair, because we now we will have an alternative route that we didn't have there before. We have a resource in place that we can enact. But you're perfectly right. I think what we need is the result on the ground, and that's going to start coming when the inspectors are making decisions and we see the fruit of what they're producing in time. That's what will really shift opinion. Yes, the planning of the project is great and that's fine, but it's that outcome that we need, and that we can be certain that we're providing quality is a critical point. But I say this is a shifting the dial. I think that does do that, and it does hopefully allow other parts of the planning system a little bit of loosening up to allow them to look at improving their system. So that's what we hope through this very focused change is, hopefully it'll be a little spread out.
And you talk there about councils, and you've briefed in writing SOLAS in relation to it, and I think you sort of said, in paraphrasing, take me up if I've taken you up wrong, but that you'll be there for councils to engage with you. Should there not be, say, a monthly, bi-monthly, weekly type of engagement that should be happening with the councils, given that they are such a massive stakeholder, that would be in place just to pick up on emerging issues even that crop up?
Yeah, I think that's one of the important things that we need to look at in the communications plan, Chair. But what we also have is we engage with the heads of planning every 2 months. That's a very important facility to use to brief them as to where they are. And again, I think we've got to remain open to saying, we're happy to come and speak about this, say where we broadly are, and be guided to them as to the amount of engagement they think is appropriate as well. So at this early door stage, we're keen to engage.
Okay. Cathal, you were looking in on
just quickly, Chair, there's an interesting subject. I mean, to be honest, and it's a tough ask, but you can break it down in the application process so we get the right point. Whilst you say investors don't come in here, when you're putting in a big application, they have some of the best people that advise on public. So that's not the issue. You know what I mean? So you have a number of stakeholders, you definitely have to get right to them. My question for it, and taking on, I know who you need to engage, besides the general public, the councils, applicants, agents, we call them agents, but architects would be us. Do you think we'll require legislative change at the end of the process?
I think at this stage, what we're focusing on is this process to allow, in some ways, it is a pilot to say how might the process change at the end. We know that there's going to be the audit office review of the PAC, which I think is to come out in autumn. That will make interesting reading to see how we respond to that. So I think we need to respond to that. But in the meantime, I think it's for us to, push a few things. Let's see what works here. We think there's things that we can build into the system which will inform any change down the line.
The problem that most of the benefits we've identified through all the reports we've done. But it's a challenge.
There's bits, to shave off, I think, in terms of processes, procedures, just to get them moving as smoothly as we can.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. And lastly, just for you both, Keith again touched on this, what's the headline that you want to be at the end of, if you could have one headline in relation to what these two projects will hopefully achieve, what would it be on planning and on the urban drainage?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I think for me is that, when work was ready to go into a hearing or public inquiry or examination, it was able to do so immediately. That for me is the big bit.
Okay, thank you, Simon.
For us, it's really getting all of the key players to look at dealing with rainwater at source, how we deal with it at source and deal with it more naturally, deal with it on the surface. Don't depend on getting it away as quickly as possible through pipes. let's deal with it on the surface and manage the way rainwater was always managed more naturally. So it's really not looking to concrete and grey infrastructure, look to green and blue.
Okay, sorry, Keith.
Just a quick question. I'm just not clear, Simon, where you're heading. You've 10,000 cubic metres of storage. Call it holdback. Call it what you want.
Yep.
Maybe a better term, is it? Are you going to do that for the benefit, e.g. down Patrick or Belfast, as in storm? Are you going to do it for the benefit of NI Water, as in preventing storm entering combined systems, or slowing down water hitting tributaries, rivers, etc., and prevent flooding? Which angle are you going here?
Well, this pilot is based on the combined sewer network and trying to reduce and slow the flow of rainwater.
So you're taking storm out of the combined system, ultimately saving NI Water money.
Yes.
So what's NI Water bringing to this?
Well, NI Water we're already looking at what they call misconnections.
But this is 15 million. You're going to help them. To be fair.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yes, it is. But I think. Well, they're they're a collaborator. They're working with us on this. So they're bringing their expertise to it as well. They're already working on misconnections in the Stuart said in those two catchments that we're looking at. So they're doing work there. So if we can work collaboratively, I think that working collaboratively, I'm not saying they're going to contribute money to it at this point in time, but if again it's demonstrating the benefit of this and then that we can work more collaboratively. I can't think of another word with NI Water. So it's just changing.
So it's taking roughly 10,000 cubes out of the combined system, storing it, and letting it go slowly into ordinary rivers.
Well, it could be ordinary rivers. It could be into the ground, or it could back into the system again.
It could be back in.
Yes.
Depending where it is.
Yes, and more likely back in because if you slow it down, you reduce the peak. You reduce the peak that it does.
Which interesting as this develops, getting a bit more detail. But as in whenever you start to work out little schemes,
your questions are all right.
Yeah.
There are a whole range of things. Where do you go with this? And I think the pilot project, 15 million, isn't a lot of money really when you consider it. So your question is. So I'm trying to be as straight as I can. We are focusing on the combined sewer network, and as I said at the start, NI Water will be the beneficiary of this, but I think we'll all be the beneficiary if there's less pollution. And as I said, the Severn Trent, the Mansfield pilot was led by Severn Trent, which is the water company.
Mm-hmm.
So,
John, or Simon, if you could get a few pound left, drop a couple of streamers over the Carrickfergus for
hey, there's a wee bit of grass.
Don't mention it to Andrew, you'll have a Connor.
So you can move out.
Helps them on a steel, whatever you got.
Send them the sun out.
It will be interesting to see how it progresses and what comes out of it.
Yeah, thanks guys. That was really
and
useful.
certainly as a committee, we would be keen to keep checking in and having a look. So whenever you have in that 6 to 9 month period, whenever you have some more detail, if you could make the committee aware of some of that information, would be really grateful.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Okay, members, just want to check before I move on. Is there anything that anybody wants to check up coming out of that? Are you okay?
Just to be kept abreast.
Keith, I see the clock's turning. You all right?
Oh, no, you're not. I think we need another conversation on this plan. I'm just not clear what that's going to do. Maybe I'm just not seeing it.
And what is it?
So if these people are there tomorrow, the 3 million spent and you've got staff there, what are they actually doing? Producing reports, right? But I don't understand what that's going to do.
Well, I think
maybe I just haven't grasped that, to be honest.
I think maybe the main thing with that planning issue is, as we have always heard, is a resource issue in terms of the staffing levels that have been there. Do you want to check in terms of the capacity resource, whether that will actually help from a departmental view? I mean, today we're having the first briefing on this. Yeah. So, I mean, it will be...
Sure, I want to put it another way, because we all know what the issues are in planning.
Yeah.
So, it's like the terms of reference, what, you know what I mean? Yeah. What exactly is the 3 million? You know, where we're starting. I mean, we know... Everybody says, right, the bigger projects, they don't want to come and invest. But we know rightly that there's thousands upon thousands of pounds put in to a major application to get it over the line. And it's still stopped. So what I'd like to find out, and you mentioned part of it, Chair, engagement with councils. The legislation's there for what for what council's supposed to do anything. All these things are in place. So I take it the premise of all this is going to engage with everyone who's to say, this is a better way of going about it. I don't know myself. I'm just trying to get.
I'm just not clear what he's
exactly.
And I didn't want to interrogate Alistair, to be fair, but I just don't get it. I just don't get it. I get exactly what Simon's on it, but I don't get what Alistair. What's that going to do?
The
question is then, I suppose, in trying to ascertain from the department, from the minister, what the terms of reference are for both Alistair and, to be honest, Simon. I wouldn't mind seeing that as well. Are you content with that?
Yeah. But what are we asking, Joe? For the clear definition of terms of it's like a terms of reference, isn't it? Like something.
I was expecting, whenever I referred to the idiot's guide explanation, to be a bit more simpler, but I just didn't get it. He wanted environmental stuff, which is fine, but I just didn't get. I don't understand what he's trying to do.
Yeah,
I think I know what he's trying to do, but just let's seek him and find out more from the department.
And like as I said there at the end, our committee will need to make sure that the money that is spent is actually going to what this should be doing on the tin.
And we didn't ask him to be good to find it as well. 3 million, what's that going to get us? How many years? How many people?
Yeah.
No, and to be fair to Keith, and Keith asked about NAW, because if the water's running off the mountain, it's not NAW, it's not a NAW's issue. We need that. We could get into the whole, but this, for the planning stuff, we need the terms of reference and see exactly what.
Yeah,
did you want to come in?
Just around the quantifying of it, I think on the back of the pilot, it would be really good if we could concentrate down.
Yeah.
Maybe the project in England will provide that too, in terms of, I don't know if it's possible, but a very basic calculation that invest this in that to take that out of the system, to save that through electricity. I mean, I don't know, but that's what they're aiming for. That was the rationale of the scheme. So surely in the back of the project, there's going to get the point. So that in the future, when Pilot 2 pops up, we can say, okay, well, you're going to spend that. Are you going to save that from their budget?
But if they only hold back 10,000 cubes and put it in, all you're saving, which is a big thing, is CSOs. That's all you're doing. You're not saving any money. You're stopping combined storm overflows, which is fine. But if you're just letting in slower, it doesn't shock the plant. But you're not saving a pound. From a treatment point of view, you need to be storing it and letting it into the local drain if you can.
Yeah, you do. You need about if it's fairly clean water, you need about.
In a few months, that's why
they brought the storm drains in the first place.
Okay.
And 90% was going into the street.
Anyway.
Yeah. So content with that we just get more detail in terms of reference on both. I think we need to have it. All right.
Just to clarify, Chair, so did you want to know exactly what the 3 million is buying as well?
Well, they're going to employ staff.
Okay.
And how many that's going to be and for how long? So 3 million is a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money if you get the staff.
And then there's the calculation of any investor save calculations that are made.
But we definitely need to know, besides what the 3 million, we actually need to know what they're going to do.
I'm just not clear what that's going to do.
It's not clear what the engage with councils, engage with agents, engage with community places, they said, which is right.
Yeah.
But they're in the system already. Yeah. But I mean, let's see. Let's try and find out as much as we can.
All right, content with that? Okay, we're going to move on now to written evidence. So we have the Clean Water Sports Alliance Northern Ireland, page 251. You'll see written evidence from the Clean Water Sports Alliance Northern Ireland. And Andrew, did you want in on that?
Well, just thanks for going through it. I think the group would like to engage with us as a committee. They'd also like to engage with the DAERA committee. I'm aware that we're quite squeezed for time as such, but if there was a forum in which they could come, would that be agreeable even to engage just with again? Yeah. I think we do talk about sort of the environmental, economic, but this really is the societal impact that's happening across the range of access to water activities.
Yeah, no, I don't think we're, I don't think it's not. We don't want to engage, if that makes sense. I think, it's important that we have engagement to understand, obviously, all of the impacts, but I suppose some of this relates to water quality, which is outside of our remit it's a DAERA point of view. Yeah. So I was maybe thinking in terms of a forum to do that might be an informal meeting between the DAERA and the Infrastructure Committee, where we say have a date and it's informal, so that we invite Infrastructure Committee members and DERA to hear from the Alliance? Would that be
That's
something
an option. That'll be great to say. It is. I appreciate it's cross-cutting, but
yeah,
I mean, a lot of the water is coming through the water infrastructure, and we all know the issues with that. So I do. Yeah. Yep. No,
Sure. Is that a 115 event? You know.
Well, they
type of
they did launch there a while ago, and you were invited, like, I mean,
firing out there 3 times. Which email address did that go to? There somewhere.
But again, they are just trying to raise the profile and all the rest, and that we'd like to engage further. So if I was agreeable to the. Yeah,
I know it was difficult because it was on a Wednesday in between committee times.
That's why.
Not that I'm covering for anybody.
It was sitting in junk email. Sorry,
I know myself. I could only attend for
But you're just to find that. So what's our role? Sorry.
So obviously infrastructure, we're aware of the overspills and things like that, which is causing some of the pollution. But water quality falls under DERA. So that's why.
No, 100%. I'm just trying to get. I had a mind meeting, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's just we need papers on whatever we're going to discuss.
Well, that is the paper.
Yeah.
That is the paper there. That's the written evidence that they have provided to us. So obviously we've done an awful lot of work in terms of NI water and what happens there. But I suppose they're quite keen to have engagement. They're quite keen to have engagement with ourselves. So I think the way to do that is an informal meeting, where it's joined between DERA and infrastructure. I think that's probably one of the ways.
And just through you, Chair, and have you got anything back from the departments on this?
Not as of yet, no.
Not of yet, right, okay. Well, you know what I mean, it's just as we're talking, so we know what it's, but that's grand, that's their starting paper here, yeah.
All right.
So we'll have to write the departments.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank
you, Chair.
Okay, are you content then that we arrange the informal meeting then for DERA and ourselves?
Very much so.
Okay,
Thank
you. Okay, item 10 is the SR is not subject to assembly procedure. So there are 3 statutory rules that are not subject to assembly proceedings and are not required to be laid. These are at pages 257 to 200. Oh, sorry, 4. There's 4. That are not
Chair,
subject.
I think there's 4.
that are not required to be laid. These are pages 257 to 274 of the meeting pack, and they are the SR 2025-93, the road races Drumhawk, Hill Climb, Order North Ireland 2025, SR 2025-94, the parking places on roads, coaches amendment Order North Ireland 2025, SR 2025. 95, the road races Tandragee 100 Order Northern Ireland 2025, and the SR 2025-96, the road races Carnhill Climb Order Northern Ireland 2025. So are members content to note the statutory rules?
Great.
Okay, thank you. So item 11 is a draft forward work programme. So you'll see that at page 276. And then in your table pack, you'll see at page 2 the invitation from the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs to join a concurrent meeting at 9:30 on the 3rd of June. If I can be there for 9:30, you can. So that's next week. Obviously, if you could please bear that in mind. So I'm just seeking agreement that we have this joint concurrent meeting next week. Are you content with that?
Where's that, Chair?
You'll see that in your table pack.
I haven't got the table pack on the right side.
Yeah.
So 3rd of June at 9:30?
3rd of June at 9. Next Tuesday morning.
At 9:30?
At 9:30.
Up in Belfast, up where we work?
Yes.
9:30 in the morning?
Yes.
Tuesday morning?
I'm usually there.
Do you know where it is? I know, it's just round the corner, isn't it?
So,
put the sat nav on. Yeah, Chair. What room is it in?
It's room Senate chamber. Yeah, Senate. All right. Okay, so.
You love my apologies.
Yeah.
I'm not in the context.
That's okay, no problem. Okay, so I'm just seeking agreement that we proceed with the evidence sessions as set out in the draft forward work programme, and obviously to reflect any decisions that were taken today. You content?
Great.
Okay, thank you. Item 12 is any other business. So does members have any other business that they want to raise at this moment in time? No? Okay, thank you. So the date, time and location of the next meeting is when, well, we'll obviously have our concurrent meeting on the 3rd of June at 9:30, but then our infrastructure committee meeting will be Wednesday the 4th of June at 10 a.m. in room 29 in Parliament Buildings. Thank you everybody. I now adjourn.